Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 12th of March. Your headlines. Israel launches a wave of strikes on Lebanon overnight, killing at least 8 people in the capital, Beirut. Iran begins its most intense operation, hitting fuel tanks in Bahrain and oil tankers near the Strait of Hormuz, warning oil could rise to $200 a barrel. An American investigation finds the US responsible for a strike on the Iranian primary school, which killed at least 165 people, mostly children. Also ahead, Sir Keir Starmer accused of dishonesty, his leadership in turmoil following the release of the Mandelson Files.
The Prime Minister should never have made this decision. He has not been honest with the country. He has not been honest with Parliament.
And MPs to explore the fairness of student loan repayments and whether the burden on young people is too high. Plus, at 6:40, we'll be seeing what's making headlines in today's papers with Millie Cook. Hello, good morning. The war in Iran, unleashed by the US and Israel nearly 2 weeks ago, has killed around 2,000 people. The deaths are mostly in Iran and Lebanon. In the early hours of this morning, at least 8 people were killed in an Israeli strike in Lebanon. There was no warning of the attack in central Beirut, an area not known for having a Hezbollah presence. 31 others were wounded. In Bahrain, there's a huge fire northeast of the capital, Manama, after Iran attacked fuel tanks near the international airport. Now, the Gulf nation is home to the US Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters. And 2 oil tankers have been attacked in Iraqi waters, killing a member of crew. Iraqi officials say they appear to have been targeted by Iranian boats packed with explosives. It's after 3 other vessels were struck near the Strait of Hormuz. Well, Iran's president has outlined his 3 conditions to end the war: recognition of Tehran's legitimate rights, payments, reparations, and the firm international guarantees against future aggressions. He's warning the world should be ready for oil to hit $200 a barrel otherwise. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has been asked about America's war aims. Here's what he had to say.
The main thing is we have to win this thing, win it quickly, but win it. And there are many people, I'm just watching some of the news, most people say it's already been won. It's just a question of when. When do we stop? We don't want to let it regrow, and ideally would like to see somebody in there that knows what they're doing. In other words, they can build a country.
Now, it's one of the most devastating military mistakes of the war so far, a strike on a school in Iran which killed 165 people, mostly primary-aged girls. And an American investigation has found the United States was responsible. It's thought out-of-date intelligence led to the attack using a Tomahawk missile. Our US correspondent, David Blevins, has the details.
This is an ongoing investigation, so these are preliminary findings, but they are damning, that it is likely the United States fired the missile that hit the school. The word likely doing some heavy lifting there, given the mounting evidence. That the missile did not veer off course, as some have suggested, but the school was mistaken for a military target. And while the Defence Intelligence Agency here in the United States made the decision, Israel was involved in the process of selecting targets. That's all very difficult for President Trump. His press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, says he hasn't seen the report, but will accept the outcome of the investigation. He has been out and about in Ohio and Kentucky, trying to reassure people that he's addressing the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz and that oil prices will be falling again soon. Why? Well, it's midterm election year, and he was the president who won back the White House on a pledge not to engage in another foreign war, but to address the cost of living right here at home.
Well, as you heard there from David, the Strait of Hormuz is a key point in this conflict. Iran has renewed attacks on commercial ships there, part of its efforts to block the vital trade route and drive up the price of oil. Well, Sky's Sally Lockwood reports from the United Arab Emirates at the Strait of Hormuz.
This conflict is striking deeper at the global economy. Oil storage facilities, one of the latest targets at Oman's port of Salalah. And with oil markets already shaken by disruption across the Gulf, the International Energy Agency has agreed to release a record volume of emergency oil reserves, the largest intervention in its history, in an attempt to steady prices.
But, to be clear, the most important thing for a return to stable flows of oil and gas is the resumption of transit through the Strait of Hormuz.
But right now, the Strait of Hormuz looks like this. Commercial shipping at a standstill in this strategic choke point for the world's energy. And it's become incredibly dangerous. This Thai-flagged ship caught fire after being hit by Iran while trying to escape the strait. In the past day, at least 3 vessels have been attacked by projectiles, likely drones.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard claimed responsibility for the attack on the Thai-flagged vessel, which is little surprise. They have threatened to attack any ship that tries to pass, and it's brought this shipping superhighway to a standstill. Iran controls the strait, and its effective closure raises the cost of the war, not just for its enemies, but for the entire world.
The US is working on plans to secure international ships in the strait, and US Central Command has targeted Iranian vessels suspected of being poised to lay mines in the waterway. The US president sounding much more upbeat than the global markets, even telling oil companies they should be sailing through Hormuz.
We took out just about all of their mine ships in one night. We're up to boat number 60. Every one of their ships, just about all of their navy is gone at the bottom of the sea.
Iran's navy may be degraded, but its cheap drones are still hitting the arteries of global trade. Closing the Strait of Hormuz is one of Iran's most powerful weapons.
Any vessel whose ship or oil cargo belongs to the United States, the Zionist regime, or their hostile partners will be considered a legitimate target.
But it's not just the Gulf on edge tonight. Around 30 countries have voiced concern over renewed fighting in Lebanon, and outrage is growing after a residential building was hit in the latest wave of airstrikes. And Tehran has been hit in one of its heaviest nights of bombing so far. And tonight, most of Iran's women's football team, who recently turned down an offer of asylum in Australia, are returning home, back to a country now at war, in a conflict felt far beyond the Middle East. Sally Lockwood, Sky News, on the Strait of Hormuz.
Now, Sir Keir Starmer promised to clean up politics, and yet he finds himself at the centre of one of the biggest political scandals this century. Files released by the government about Peter Mandelson's appointment as ambassador to the United States clearly show the Prime Minister was warned of the reputational risk in hiring Mandelson because of his links to Jeffrey Epstein. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, has the details and a warning her report does contain flash photography.
Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson, the paedophile, the peer, and now a Prime Minister under huge pressure for putting Mandelson back into his government. The decision to appoint Peter Mandelson US ambassador hurting Starmer still. The government forced into releasing the first of thousands of documents detailing Mandelson's vetting, appointment and sacking, and proving in black and white that red flags were clearly raised. The confidential due diligence report into Mandelson reveals the Prime Minister was told the relationship was particularly close and that it continued well after Epstein was first convicted of procuring an underage girl in 2008 for sex. It was flagged to Starmer that Mandelson reportedly stayed in Epstein's house while he was in jail in June 2009, and there was a general reputational risk over Mandelson's relationship with Epstein. All of it difficult, the PM's Chief Secretary Darren Jones dispatched to the Commons to defend his boss.
The Prime Minister has taken responsibility for Peter Mandelson's appointment as ambassador to the United States. He has acknowledged it was a mistake and has apologised, not least for believing Peter Mandelson's lies. Whilst the documents point to public reports of an ongoing relationship between Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein, the advice did not expose the depth and extent of their relationship, which only became apparent after the release of further files by Bloomberg and then the United States Department for Justice.
But the opposition having none of it.
Now, the Prime Minister claims that he was lied to. He wasn't lied to by this due diligence document. And it may be that Mandelson denied these claims. And if so, maybe the Prime Minister was lied to. But he was lied to by an inveterate liar who had been fired twice before. And we're supposed to believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the Prime Minister, who was once the chief prosecutor in this country, couldn't see through this nonsense. It beggars belief.
The Prime Minister has already admitted that he knew that there was an ongoing relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson before these files dropped. But to see it laid out so clearly, well, that is really difficult for him. Add to that the revelations that his national security advisor, Jonathan Powell, thought the appointment was weirdly rushed and unusual, and the fact that Peter Mandelson received a £75,000 payout after he was sacked, and the mood amongst MPs darkens still. This is a crisis for Starmer that's not going away. These documents just the beginning of revelations. Number 10 hoped that when the police allow the release of more exchanges between the PM and his former man in Washington, Starmer might be cast in a slightly better light. But for an embattled PM, this is the last thing he needs. Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Well, let's speak to our political correspondent now, Alex Rogers. And I suppose today the Prime Minister will face fresh questions and more pressure. Alex, morning.
Absolutely. I think this has been so damaging for the Prime Minister, even though not much new information came to light. I think what's been most striking is how plainly it was laid out that Mandelson's appointment posed a reputational risk to the government. And there's this key line in the documents that we heard from Jonathan Powell, Keir Starmer's trusted national security advisor, who thought that Mandelson's appointment was unusual and weirdly rushed. So there's going to be questions over why Keir Starmer didn't listen to that. One minister I've been speaking to said it's also damning. I don't see how he survives. And of course, there's criticism from the Conservatives to Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Tory party, saying yesterday that the Prime Minister hadn't been honest with the country. Here's what she had to say.
This is yet another indictment of Keir Starmer's judgment. He wants to make this all about Peter Mandelson asking for money. The fact is, he wouldn't have been paying out that severance package if he hadn't appointed him in the first place. And the vetting that we have now seen, the documents that we have now seen, have shown that the Prime Minister should never have made this decision. He has not been honest with the country. He's not been honest with Parliament about what he knew. Now he's complaining about the severance package, but the fact is he's the one who signed it off in the first place.
Once again, because of these files, the Prime Minister's judgment and position are being called into question from the Conservatives there. And what's more, is we know that there are more files that are yet to be released. Some are currently being held back because of that live police investigation into Peter Mandelson, who was arrested last month over allegations of misconduct in public office, which he does deny. So conversations that nearly destabilised the Prime Minister last month coming to the fore once again, just as it seemed that the his stance on the Iran war may have won him a bit of a reprieve from his critics.
OK, for now, Alex, thanks so much. And for plenty more on that and all of the day's top stories, make sure you check out our Cheat Sheet podcast with Sophie and Matt.
I mean, the fact that Peter Mandelson tried to get £500,000 or more in a payoff it's pretty eye-watering.
It's absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
And also the fact that he blames the reputational damage on being sacked rather than what he was actually sacked for.
Yes, I think the reputational damage is well and truly done, regardless, by some of his own actions. But the fact that he then did get a £75,000 payoff will stick in the craw of quite a few people. I think Darren Jones explained in the Commons yesterday, didn't he, that they summed up that it would be likely cheaper to pay that than get into some sort of tribunal.
And if you scan the QR code, it's on the screen. You can listen to today's Cheat Sheet podcast in full. It's well worth it. Now, Parliament's launching a new inquiry to explore just how fair the student loan system is. There's been growing pressure on the government to address graduates' concerns about repayment terms. And now those paying back a loan are being urged to make their voices heard. Let's speak to our correspondent, Graham Stothard. Graham, how big is the problem then?
Well, you know, it's millions, millions and millions of pounds. It's a huge problem, and actually it focuses around what's known as a Phase 2 loan. Those were loans issued to students from England between 2012 and 2023. And it sees graduates who earn above a threshold of around £30,000 and pay 9% of their monthly salary. But crucially, the interest rate is set at the retail price index. That's a measure of inflation. It currently sits at about 4%, but then plus 3% as well. So that means that debt for many students or many graduates who have now been paying off their loan has been piling up despite them saying goodbye to quite a significant amount of their paycheck. And they're asking the Treasury Select Committee essentially whether the goalposts have been moved from when students signed up to those loans, and the goalposts have been moved. That's a direct quote from the Treasury Select Committee Chair, Meg Hillier. So they're essentially asking whether students were well enough informed in terms of the debt they were getting into, whether they would still take out the loans today, what impact those loans are having on their day-to-day finances. And they're asking them to reach out to them. They are issuing a survey that graduates can fill in. They are also asking them to submit direct evidence to the inquiry itself. That's up until around mid-April that they can do that. Now, at the last budget, the debate was actually reignited because the Chancellor revealed that the threshold would be raised slightly, but would also then be frozen for 3 years. And due to inflation, that meant more graduates would be dragged into that payback bracket. And the whole system's been criticised by a number of MPs. It's been criticised by National Union of Students. It's been criticised by students themselves. It's been criticised by Kemi Badenoch, although, of course, it was the Conservative-led government that actually brought in these Phase 2 loans. Kemi Badenoch has described the whole system as a sham. There are people who believe that the threshold should be increased to better protect lower and middle-income earners. There are some people who believe that the interest rate should be fixed at a different amount. Rachel Reeves has said that any change needs to be fully costed, that they've decided to prioritise spending on the NHS, on the defence budget, but this is still an incredibly live issue for many graduates, some of whom built up loans, built up debts of over £50,000 at the point they left university.
OK, Graham, for now, great stuff, thank you. Still to come. Israel continues its attacks in Gaza, hitting a tent camp housing displaced Palestinians.
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere.
The day those present would never forget.
First question, Sky News.
Do you hate the thought of losing to him?
I hate the thought of losing to anyone.
Historic day here today.
They are pushing forward.
They dashed to the water.
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK.
Why don't you go back to your country?
Huge questions to be grappled with.
That is totally unprecedented. Been quite some day.
We start with breaking news.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders.
It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbors, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical.
Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history.
The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbors that harbor decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day.
Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate.
It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching tonight on The Wrap. We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why. He did know what he was doing. Both agree on that, can we?
No.
No. Can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable?
What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't
rule out strikes. I disagree.
And laughs along the way.
Cheap,
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
Israel has carried out a strike on a camp in Gaza, sheltering displaced Palestinians. The Israeli military attacked the Ansar camp west of Gaza City, causing a huge fire, as you can see. Now, the people there say they now have nothing left and nowhere left to go. Israel reportedly gave the residents of the tent camp a 5-minute warning to leave. Well, as you've been hearing, Israel is also attacking Lebanon. They say they're targeting the Iranian-backed group Hezbollah, which is retaliating. And now the United Nations Security Council is demanding Israel and Lebanon stop firing at each other.
Hezbollah must cease its attacks on Israel and cooperate with the government's efforts to assert full state authority and establish a monopoly over weapons. Israel must halt its military campaign in Lebanon and withdraw its forces from Lebanese territory.
Our international correspondent John Sparks is in southern Beirut at the site of an Israeli attack.
The southern suburbs of Beirut, they've been pounded through the night. I mean, you need to be a very sound sleeper to get through that. I think just about everybody in the city has been kept awake tonight, particularly where I am in a district very close to the center. It's a middle-income district. It's densely populated. It's mixed. Shia, Sunni, Christian. They live here, and one of the apartment buildings has been subjected to pretty major attack. Just going to move my colleague back a little bit. It's pretty frenetic here, people cleaning up the streets. You can see that blast. It has sprayed glass and rubble, shards of metal all over the place. I wouldn't call it a precision strike, more like a targeted strike. It's taken out parts of four floors in this building. You can see they're trying to sort things out here. It's a bit of a metaphor for Beirut. You know, you've had a missile strike on an apartment building, and somehow life continues. I don't want to make sure we don't get our feet run over. Okay. Right, here we're going to move back a bit, so we're in the way. But it's a targeted strike by the Israelis. There was no evacuation order here. There was no warning to local residents. We assume they were after specific individuals, and they've done this before, just behind you there, yeah. They've done this before on Sunday morning, a hotel near to here called the Ramada Plaza. The Israelis took out a corner room there. They said they killed 4 senior commanders of Iran's Revolutionary Guards, who the Israelis say they have personnel here. They're working as military advisors to Hezbollah. And I think it goes to show there is no front line in Lebanon. The Israelis can attack the location of their choosing at the time of their choosing. And you can see the aftermath of that here. Yeah, here, we're just going to move back. It's pretty frenetic here. There's a lot of cleaning up and stuff going on. They've reattached the electricity. They're trying to get the road functioning again. And I suppose that's an example of the government of this country functioning to a certain extent, but they're certainly not able to maintain the situation. They're certainly not able to rein Hezbollah in, and the government here certainly not able to do anything about the Israeli strikes either. I mean, it has turned into a real humanitarian disaster in this country. You're looking at almost 600 people have been killed, hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced, and you'll have people from here looking for somewhere else to stay as well. So I mean, it's really, nobody's been untouched by this in Lebanon.
John Sparks reporting there. Well, we're going to pause from the escalation in the Middle East and take a look at the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
The next few days will bring strong winds, showers and longer spells of rain, and it will turn colder. There'll be a fairly mild, windy morning with locally severe gales over northern and western coasts and hills. Central and southwestern Britain, Ireland and the south of Northern Ireland will see prolonged rain taking over, while the northwest will see early rain clearing to sunny spells and blustery showers. And they'll be heavy at times and wintry on the hills. Central and southeastern England, meanwhile, will look mainly dry, increasingly cloudy. It'll be cooler, especially in the north, with the stiff wind making it feel even colder. Now, the southeast will see patchy rain later, while southern Scotland and Ireland will turn showery. Mountain snow in the north will descend to quite low levels, and showers will continue there overnight, while England and Wales will see locally heavy rain clearing across the southeast, and a scattering of showers will follow to the west a bit later. And then Friday will be cool and windy with sunny spells and just a scattering of showers concentrated in the northwest.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, coming up after the break, we're going to take a look at how drones are claiming lives in the conflict in Sudan.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty.
War isn't pretty.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders.
It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbors, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days, as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical.
Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history.
The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbors that harbor decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day.
Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate.
It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching tonight on The Wrap. We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why he did know what he was doing.
Both agree on that, can we?
No.
No.
Can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable?
What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree.
And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
Now, we've been focusing a lot on the war in Iran, but there are, of course, conflicts all over the world, including Sudan. Now, the country has been at war for almost 3 years, and we've just, as we've seen in Ukraine and the Middle East, drones are playing a big part in claiming lives. Here's our Africa correspondent, Yusuf El-Bagir.
Sudan's war will soon hit 3 years of relentless armed violence, and instead of winding down, it is intensifying into a brutal trap. Drone attacks by the warring Rapid Support Forces and Sudanese military have surged as they battle for more territory, and civilians escaping the onslaught to neighboring countries are being caught in more conflict, and in some cases, even being deported back to Sudan as drone strikes pummel the population. The armed conflict location and event data, an independent global monitor, has documented at least 198 drone strikes in Sudan in just the first 2 months of 2026. At least 52 of them involved civilian casualties, killing 478 people. This military drone strike on a market killed 13 people, while this RSF drone targeted a university, with another hitting a humanitarian convoy, killing 3 aid workers. And just before the end of 2025, a triple drone strike by the RSF on a kindergarten and hospital in South Kordofan state claimed the lives of 114 people, including 43 children. This haunting cycle of violence feels never-ending, especially for civilians on the ground who have few safe options. The RSF is expanding its full control of Darfur, targeting border areas and rival militia territory. A United Nations fact-finding mission found that the paramilitary group's siege and capture of al-Fashir, the capital of North Darfur, had the hallmarks of genocide, with at least 6,000 people killed by the RSF in the city and surrounding areas in just 3 days. Survivors of the capture are scattered in camps all over Sudan, still facing the threat of drone strikes and worsening food insecurity as aid dwindles. This map shows the spread of drone strikes across the country, even hitting the border of neighboring Chad. Chad hosts close to 1 million Sudanese refugees and recently closed its borders with Sudan after multiple cross-border attacks by the RSF. Other neighboring countries like South Sudan and Ethiopia are dealing with the threat of their own civil wars and are increasingly unsafe for refugees. And Egypt, a key safe haven for Sudanese refugees, is now deporting them en masse. This video shared online shows the arrest of a Sudanese man by Egyptian authorities. We've been told by affected families that their status as asylum seekers with the United Nations Refugee Agency is often ignored, as their loved ones are detained and deported. 18-year-old An-Nazir Al-Sadiq was one of the victims. He died in an Egyptian detention center. His friends tell us he was arrested from this neighborhood in Cairo, and that 3 of the young men with him were deported. His parents have now returned to Sudan for their own safety, after living in daily fear of detention, deportation, or death in Egypt. The Sudanese embassy in Cairo says close to 600 Sudanese nationals were deported back to their war-torn home from Egypt in December and January. And that number is rapidly rising as the crackdown on vulnerable Sudanese refugees continues. We approached the Egyptian government for comment, but they didn't respond. And here in the UK, the Home Secretary's emergency ban on study visas for students from Afghanistan, Myanmar, Cameroon and Sudan to slow asylum claims has meant that Sudan's best and brightest minds, at least 220 Sudanese students, are being prevented from pursuing scholarships to some of the UK's best universities. At least 22 of them were meant to study at the University of Oxford. 39 of them were accepted in a UK government-funded scholarship for emerging leaders. This is Khartoum, the embattled capital city that Sudanese people are left with. Some of them deported and others have returned willingly, rebuilding what they can as drones silently stalk from the skies, threatening more destruction.
Now, Iran will not compete in this year's World Cup, which is being held in the US. The country's sports minister says they're not in a position to take part because they're at war with the host nation. In response, President Trump has insisted that Iran is welcome at this summer's finals. Well, let's take a look at some more sports.
Adding a continental touch to Arsenal's never say die style is what Wenger is promising.
Quand je suis venu, je veux dire, il y a tout ce qu'il faut pour être un grand club. Je veux dire, ils ont un public qui est fabuleux. Je veux dire, il y a des terrains où on peut s'entraîner. Il y a un entourage qui est très bien. Je veux dire, ils ont des très bonnes structures.
I think it was a big chance for Arsenal to take this player because I believe he has a great future.
He knew he had to get those kind of players that will know his philosophy and will help him implement that philosophy on the pitch at Arsenal. If you want to change the mentality at Arsenal, you don't go and sign English players.
It didn't have as big an effect as when we signed Dennis Bergkamp. That was like a massive statement. When Patrick signed, these are players that nobody's really heard of.
I was happy to have the chance to sign him. And overall, Patrick Vieira landed at Arsenal, but nobody knew that I was a manager. So at the start, he didn't play.
So actually Remy Gard came in at the same time. Remy was an accomplished player, but also I think to give Patrick comfort that he wasn't alone, he wasn't the only French guy in the dressing room. So, and I think that worked well. Remy was a little bit more of a mature player than Patrick.
Remy was great for Patrick because Remy spoke English. Remy was so smart, loved everything about London, would go to museums, go and take Patrick along with him. And Patrick was so young, all of this was new to him.
They were not speaking well English at the start and they had to adapt. Remy Gard is a very intelligent person. Patrick Vieira will know better than I do, but it was certainly important to him.
I arrived at Arsenal before Arsene, so it was quite really challenging to understand the language and to really understand the culture. It was really good.
Well, coming up after the break, we'll be discussing the stories making headlines in today's papers with our panellist, Millie Cook.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders.
It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbors, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical. Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history. The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbors that harbor decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day. Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate.
It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching tonight on The Wrap. We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why he did know what he was doing. Both agree on that, can we?
No.
No. Can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable?
What he's interested in is a deal.
That
doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree. And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
being a Sky News presenter?
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, the next few days will bring strong winds, showers and longer spells of rain, and it will turn colder. There will be a fairly mild, windy morning with locally severe gales over northern and western coasts and hills, central and southwestern Britain, Ireland and the south of Northern Ireland will see prolonged rain taking over, while the northwest will see early rain clearing to sunny spells and blustery showers. They'll be heavy at times and wintry on the hills. Central and southeastern England, meanwhile, will look mainly dry, if increasingly cloudy. It will be cooler, especially in the north, with the stiff wind making it feel even colder. The southeast will see patchy rain later, while southern Scotland and Ireland will turn showery. Mountain snow in the north will descend to quite low levels, and then showers will continue there overnight, while England and Wales will see locally heavy rain clearing across the southeast. Just a scattering of showers will follow to the west later. And then Friday will be cool and windy with sunny spells and a scattering of showers concentrated in the northwest.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, it's time to see what's making headlines in today's papers in our news review. Today, I'm joined by Millie Cook, a political correspondent at The Independent. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Millie. We're going to start with the front page of the Daily Telegraph, because it's now a forensic take on what happened in relation to the Mandelson Files, particularly accusations that Keir Starmer ignored top aides over Mandelson, and they put it to him that potentially he was a reputational risk.
Yeah, I mean, so yesterday we had that first tranche of files released over sort of the process of hiring Peter Mandelson as the US ambassador. And I think the key revelation in those files is the fact that Keir Starmer was repeatedly warned about Mandelson's links with convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. He was told about those links, and there was a lot of doubt sort of in the lead up to the publication of these files about whether or not Starmer knew about the extent of that relationship. And actually what these files showed was that he was warned in no uncertain terms, really. So things like it was made clear in those documents that Mandelson stayed at Jeffrey Epstein's flat while he was in prison. And so it pointed to direct news reports about that. And it also said that they sort of had a particularly close relationship. So there shouldn't really have been any doubt for Keir Starmer there that he did continue his association with Epstein. And I think the main problem here is that it raised a lot of questions about Starmer's judgment and whether or not he's able to take those really important decisions about who to hire, whether or not someone's of good character, and also whether or not he's able to listen to the advice of aides.
Yeah, we'll do the T's and C's part of this conversation. Peter Mandelson denies any wrongdoing. There's an investigation into wrongdoing in public office. But part of those files that were released yesterday, you know, hundreds of WhatsApp messages, documents, emails were released. And part of that was conversations between the Foreign Office and Peter Mandelson about payment after he was sacked. Because he was pushing, Millie, wasn't he, for £500,000. Some of the papers that are covering this, the Daily Mail are going with, well, what he eventually got was £75,000. But why did he get anything? You know, many people will be looking at this thinking, hang on a second, I've just been sacked. Why should you get 75 grand?
I mean, I think asking for £500,000 in the first place, it's a huge amount of money. But I think that 75 grand, that's a lot of money as well. And I think a lot of ordinary people will be asking that question of, if I was sacked from my job, I wouldn't be handed 75 grand. And I think there's obviously something to be said for the fact that when you work in political roles, you're in an uncertain job, the political tide can change. That's the reason they have those sort of golden handshakes, to make sure that people who go into uncertain jobs like politics are able to leave. But I think with Peter Mandelson, he left in very poor circumstances. And I think people, a lot of people, most people, think that there should be clear exceptions, and you shouldn't be automatically handed these huge sums of money when you are sacked.
And I always look at this story and all stories through the eyes of the victims, and although Peter Mandelson is being investigated for misconduct in public office, victims will be watching this, looking at people in that inner circle of Jeffrey Epstein, hurt, I think, by this story, by the allegations, and the fallout from the tranche of documents that we saw yesterday, and more are being released, we hear, in the coming weeks or so. We heard yesterday, didn't we?
Yeah, I think there's no firm date yet, but they're hoping to have something published in the next few weeks, depending on that Met Police investigation.
Yeah. OK, so let's move on then. This is a story in The Guardian. We've covered it here on mornings also, and it's all around the issues of student loans, Millie. The focus on this Guardian report, though, is all about how, an inquiry into young people and the hardship they face, given the financial changes since those loans were taken out. And I was listening to the radio the other day, and there's a 21-year-old that came from a working-class background, the first in her family to head off to university, but she's ladled with £91,000 worth of debt. And she was saying, look, the system needs to be changed because I was sold this on the premise that, you only pay 50 quid a month back if you reach a certain threshold in terms of your wage. But that's changed. It's all changed. And I wonder, how graduates feel about their prospects now. The whole point of going to university was to open up better opportunity, and they're ladled with debt.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you said about people not really understanding or having it poorly explained to them. I read one article this morning about someone who remembered that she was told that paying off her student loan would be like paying for the price of a coffee. And I think when you actually look at those repayments, it's a completely different situation. And this review is effectively looking at whether or not freezing the threshold, so the government has decided to freeze the threshold at which people start repaying those loans. So as inflation kicks in, people will be dragged into higher salary thresholds. And so effectively, the point at which you start paying it back will become lower in practice. And I think the question they're asking is effectively, if you combine that with all the other economic challenges that young people are facing, is it really fair? And also whether the interest rates that people are paying back student loans, whether that's fair as well. Because at the moment, it's RPI plus around 3%, depending on your salary. And that's actually an awful lot. And I think for some young people, lots of young people, it means that they're not paying it back quick enough for the amount of debt they've got to come down. So they'll be paying it back for, say, 5 years, and they might have more debt than they did at the start because of the interest rates piling up.
Yeah, so this is basically a cross-party committee investigation, isn't it? Because the government are currently looking at ways to potentially try to ease the burden on graduates. But, like you said, with growing interest rates, with the cost of living crisis, it can feel like a huge pressure on people that are just in their early 20s, which... it's been described as a disgrace. And then you look at other aspects of life just for young people. It's like the housing crisis. Don't even talk to them about trying to buy a property. It's rents, isn't it? Because whatever interest rates of that mortgage holder, it gets passed down to renters. So that's a whole nother issue. And you look to the future. I've got 2 young kids, and I think, do I want them to go to university even? Is that the avenue that I want to help them get into? I'm not sure. I mean, there's so much to talk about in terms of apprenticeships, but I think that's such an important story to keep focusing on. Right, we're going to double back to the war in Iran now. This is front page of the Times, and it's leading with that story about how oil could reach $200 a barrel. This is the ongoing conflict now focusing that battleground in the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran saying, look, this war will finish when we want it to finish, and we can be major players in making other people feel the cost, and that is directly linked to, attacks on vessels through that, short corridor in the Strait of Hormuz. But $200 a barrel will send people screaming with fear because the impacts of that, oil emergency reserves can be one thing, but $200 a barrel, my eyes just couldn't take that number in yesterday when it was announced. And it's going to have huge repercussions for the whole world. And people often think, don't they, that this war, thousands of miles away, won't affect them.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, when it comes to sort of the price of oil, it seems, I think, to a lot of people like quite an abstract thing, but when the price of oil goes up, it starts affecting transport, food prices, because every single thing in the economy effectively relies on the price of oil. And I think when you look at that kind of abstract figure and a war that's very far away, and then you sort of think about actually how it will impact people's lives, there's a huge amount at stake. And I think that it really shows how important that sort of small shipping corridor is.
Yeah.
It's a massive impact on the rest of the world.
Also, to your point, like how important it is for things like not just oil, but like fertilizer, and how that might then trickle down to how much we pay for bread and eggs, and then when you're looking forward to a holiday, what that might do to the price of flight. So, you know, it's a huge gamble. And then it's the Daily Telegraph, isn't it? Starmer and Reeves, their headline split over a fuel duty cut. So the pressures are multi-layered for the government dealing with this crisis, that we have no end point. There's no certainty about when it might end. That's in the hands of Donald Trump. That's in the hands of leaders in Iran.
And it's interesting that in the last story, Iran was saying that you can't artificially keep those prices down. We can send them shooting up. And I think that's what the government is sort of weighing up at the moment. They're looking at whether or not they're able to try and help households and consumers with the price of oil. And I think obviously they can play a role in it. They could not remove that 5p fuel duty cut, which is meant to sort of, towards the end of the year, the 5p fuel duty cut is going to be removed, which was put in place during the war in Ukraine. In theory, they could sort of decide to hold off on doing that. But if the price of oil goes shooting up, then there's only so much you can do, really, because it takes money. I mean, all of these policies, that takes money away from other parts of the economy.
And I was reading the papers, I think it was sometime last week, the RAC talking about the cost of filling up a tank. Well, that's set to rise. You know, it feels pretty expensive at the moment to fill up a family car. We'll see where that one goes. Let's go to the Daily Mail now, and it's all about... I mean, it's hard not to speak to someone who hasn't had a mobile or smartphone snatched out of their hand on the high street. It feels like that's happening more and more. This article focusing on police tell mobile firms you can stop the phone theft epidemic because there are things and tricks they can do. So essentially, when it's ripped out of your hand, they can render it useless, can't they? There's technology that they have to do that.
So I think this is the police urging phone firms to do more to sort of, because they can intervene and switch the phone. Obviously, I'm definitely not a tech expert, but they can intervene to sort of switch the phone off effectively and stop it from doing all the things that phones are meant to do. That's a technical term.
And they've been talking for 2.5 years about, you know, exploring this route because it's a huge issue for so many people. And what also the focus is, it's not just on the Met Police, it's also on tech firms, so Apple, Google, Samsung. You know, what are they doing to make sure these highly sophisticated devices can be rendered useless? Because it's not just the phone or the cost of the phone, it's actually how you feel violated. My sister had her phone snatched out of her hand. It was last year, early last year. She'd left work, she left the tube station in London, and she couldn't believe it. It was just snatched out of her hand. She couldn't speak, actually, for a good 30 seconds.
It's really shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, there should be more, you know, done to deal with this. And that's the criticism of both, you know, the big tech giants and also, come on, Met Police, they're being told do more.
Because I think so many people have had it happen to them, and it feels like it's been quite a long time that it's been going on, and now everyone wears those sort of phone straps.
Yes, I've seen those.
Because I don't have one, and I'm actually, touch wood, shocked that I've never had my phone snatched, because I'm always using maps when I walk around London, even though I've lived here my whole life.
Yes, stop, Millie, stop doing it.
But I can't really function without it. I've got no sense of direction. So yeah, I don't really know what the solution is, apart from, I guess, maybe this.
OK, I'm thinking what one to end on. I'm a bit obsessed with Punch the Monkey. So should we end on that? So for people that don't know, Punch the Monkey was rejected in a zoo in Japan by the adults, and he was given this teddy to comfort him, and essentially it went viral. I know it's not appeared on your TikTok feed
I'm
yet.
shocked about, to be honest.
But the story here is that essentially it's the zoo have had to come out because there's been so much concern over this monkey from all over the world that the zoo have said, look, it's OK. Punch the monkey isn't being bullied. It's been welcomed in eventually to the group of monkeys. What do you make of this story, despite not reaching your feed?
I mean, the thing that made me laugh the most about it is the fact that a sort of Japanese zoo has had to effectively issue a PR statement on behalf of a baby monkey who's gone viral on social media. And I think it's really sweet. I love it. But I'm genuinely shocked that it hasn't come up on my TikTok, and I can't wait as soon as I get off air to go and watch videos of Punch the Monkey.
OK.
But it's very sweet.
I think they missed out on not having a live feed of Punch the Monkey. Anyway, look, that's all from us. Thank you so much, Millie.
Thank you.
Thanks for your company at home. Coming up, you'll be in the reliable hands of Matt Barbet and Sophie Ridge. Stay with Sky News.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
It is 7 o'clock and you're watching Mornings on Sky News. I'm Sophie Ridge.
And I'm Matt Barbet. Good morning to you. Let's have a look at what's going on this morning. Iran carries out
another wave of attacks targeting fuel as oil rises again above $100 a barrel.
Heavy shelling in Lebanon as Israel batters the capital where dozens of displaced families were sheltering.
An American investigation finds the US was likely responsible for a strike in a primary school that killed at least 165 people, mostly children.
Also today, we're going to dive into the Mandelson Files.
Some of the details about Peter Mandelson's appointment as US ambassador are now public and may throw the Prime Minister's leadership into deeper turmoil.
Good morning, Matt and Sophie here. Not Wilf, as you can see, already trying to read your lines, of course. Good to see you.
Big, busy news day for us today, of course, because we're going to start off with the latest on Iran, which has launched a wide-scale wave of strikes almost 2 weeks after the US and Israel unleashed attacks on them.
Here's what you need to know this morning. In Bahrain, Iran attacked fuel tanks near the international airport, causing a large fire northeast of the capital, Manama. Bahrain is home to the US Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters.
2 oil tankers were also attacked in Iraqi waters, killing a crew member. Now, Iraqi officials say they appear to have been targeted by Iranian boats packed with explosives. So perhaps no surprise, this morning oil prices have again risen above $100 a barrel. That's despite the largest release of oil reserves by the world's energy watchdog.
In the early hours of this morning, at least 7 people were killed and 21 were injured in an Israeli strike in Lebanon. There was no warning of the attack in central Beirut, where displaced families were sheltering at the time. The area was not known for having a Hezbollah presence there.
Now, Iran's president has also outlined his 3 conditions for peace. So they are recognition of Tehran's legitimate rights, payment of reparations and firm international guarantees against future aggression. He's also warning the world should be ready for oil to hit $200 a barrel otherwise.
I'm not sure the world is ready for that. That's the problem, isn't it? And meanwhile, Donald Trump has again been asked about America's war aims.
The main thing is we have to win this thing, win it quickly, but win it. And there are many people, I'm just watching some of the news, most people say it's already been won. It's just a question of when. When do we stop? We don't want to let it regrow, and ideally would like to see somebody in there that knows what they're doing. In other words, they can build a country.
I mean, you said it, didn't you? The world is not ready for oil at this price, but
No.
It's clearly a tactic that Iran is using to great effect, frankly, in the war.
And it wasn't entirely unexpected, was it? You know, everybody who knows what they're looking at knows the Strait of Hormuz is going to cause the big problems for everybody else. And $200 a barrel, it seemed unthinkable a month ago, and now here we are. And you look at the markets and the way they're fluctuating, that's the biggest tell of, well, the uncertainty, despite what Donald Trump might want people to believe.
Yeah, and also it'd be interesting to see what Donald Trump does as well, right? Because, you know, inflation going up, cost of living going up, that is going to have a big impact at home in America, right? And it does, I think that is the thing that could determine how long this war continues, because Donald Trump is not going to want to take responsibility for that at home, you would think.
Well, it looks like he's trying to find an off-ramp. But now, if that off-ramp is saying, we've won, it's successful, then he may well take it. Whereas others are saying Israel does not want an off-ramp, is not looking for one. Netanyahu doesn't feel the same way.
Yeah, they've been in lots of steps so far. Let's see if it continues. Sky's Sally Lockwood is reporting from the United Arab Emirates at the Strait of Hormuz.
This conflict is striking deeper at the global economy. Oil storage facilities, one of the latest targets at Oman's port of Salalah. And with oil markets already shaken by disruption across the Gulf, the International Energy Agency has agreed to release a record volume of emergency oil reserves, the largest intervention in its history, in an attempt to steady prices.
But, to be clear, the most important thing for a return the stable flows of oil and gas is the resumption of transit through the Strait of Hormuz.
But right now, the Strait of Hormuz looks like this. Commercial shipping at a standstill in this strategic choke point for the world's energy. And it's become incredibly dangerous. This Thai-flagged ship caught fire after being hit by Iran while trying to escape the strait. In the past day, at least 3 vessels have been attacked by projectiles, likely drones.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard claimed responsibility for the attack on the Thai-flagged vessel, which is little surprise. They have threatened to attack any ship that tries to pass, and it's brought this shipping superhighway to a standstill. Iran controls the strait, and its effective closure raises the cost of the war, not just for its enemies, but for the entire world.
The US is working on plans to secure international ships in the strait. And US Central Command has targeted Iranian vessels suspected of being poised to lay mines in the waterway. The US president sounding much more upbeat than the global markets, even telling oil companies they should be sailing through Hormuz.
We took out just about all of their mine ships in one night. We're up to boat number 60. Every one of their ships, just about all of their Navy is gone at the bottom of the sea.
Iran's navy may be degraded, but its cheap drones are still hitting the arteries of global trade. Closing the Strait of Hormuz is one of Iran's most powerful weapons.
Any vessel whose ship or oil cargo belongs to the United States, the Zionist regime, or their hostile partners will be considered a legitimate target.
But it's not just the Gulf on edge tonight. Around 30 countries have voiced concern over renewed fighting in Lebanon, and outrage is growing after a residential building was hit in the latest wave of airstrikes. And Tehran has been hit in one of its heaviest nights of bombing so far. And tonight, most of Iran's women's football team, who recently turned down an offer of asylum in Australia, are returning home, back to a country now at war, in a conflict felt far beyond the Middle East.
Well, let's have a word with Sally now. And Sally, still a lot of activity overnight there.
Yeah, that's right, Matt. Good morning to you both. Not a huge amount of sleep was had here in the UAE last night. It was rather busy indeed. Emergency alerts late into the evening as people were going to bed, and then more during the night. I think I was woken up by one around 4:30 this morning, another at 7 a.m, and then news that around dawn another container ship was hit, not near the Strait of Hormuz this time, just off the coast here in Dubai, just south of me, near Jebel Ali port, a huge port, an entry point for a lot of goods coming in and energy going out, based just south of Dubai. We understand that there was a fire on board. The crew are all safe. But we've seen this so many times before. Well over a dozen ships have been hit in this region now because of this very volatile, tense situation when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. But also there was an incident close to the airport, which has also been a target on a number of occasions during this war so far. Overnight, an apartment hotel block in the Dubai Creek Harbour area, which is close to Dubai International Airport, that building was hit. Residents were evacuated and a large presence of emergency services on the scene very quickly, according to eyewitnesses. But in another development in the last 24 hours, Iran has also said that it's going to target banks and financial institutions that are related to American and Israeli interests here in the Middle East. And that prompted an evacuation of what's known as DIFC here in Dubai. It's the financial district. Several banks and financial offices emptied their buildings yesterday following that news. A notice sent to some staff warning them to leave the office and proceed to the nearest safe place away from their building. They've all been told to stay at home today. And we understand that Qatar has also got a similar evacuation order in place for HSBC branches, which are now closed in Qatar today. And I've been hearing from a number of people, Matt, Sophie, in the last 3 days, I would say, and I've had a number of conversations with people who work for global companies, many of them in finance, who are being evacuated, not just them, but their entire offices, along with their families. And this has been something I've been hearing for a few days now. And then this news that potentially financial centres like the one here in Dubai could be a target suggests, you know, that Iran isn't just going to be targeting oil. It's not just going to be targeting shipping, and international airports like Dubai, the busiest airport hub in the world, is now looking at also targeting financial centres to cause maximum disruption internationally, perhaps a strategy to apply pressure on Donald Trump to de-escalate or at least resume talks and come back to the table.
Sally, great to have you on this morning. Good to see you as always. Thank you very much indeed. That knock-on effect, our colleague Dominic Waghorn wrote a really interesting analysis of this, in that making people fear staying there is going to be the biggest consequence for Dubai and the Emirates. I think it was yesterday KLM said they were going to stop flights to there till the end of the month. And that disruption is, well, that's going to be hard to overcome, isn't it, in the coming weeks and months? And
they've always said, you know, I guess so much part of their appeal has been that they've been seen as very, very safe.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Now, we've also learned more about one of the most devastating moments of the war so far, a strike on a school in Iran that killed at least 165 people, mostly children.
An American investigation has found the United States was likely responsible, they say. Our US correspondent David Blevins has more details.
This is an ongoing investigation, so these are preliminary findings, but they are damning, that it is likely the United States fired the missile that hit the school. The word likely doing some heavy lifting there, given the mounting evidence. That the missile did not veer off course, as some have suggested, but the school was mistaken for a military target. And while the Defense Intelligence Agency here in the United States made the decision, Israel was involved in the process of selecting targets. That's all very difficult for President Trump. His press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, says he hasn't seen the report, but will accept the outcome of the investigation. He has been out and about in Ohio and Kentucky, trying to reassure people that he's addressing the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz and that oil prices will be falling again soon. Why? Well, it's midterm election year, and he was the president who won back the White House on a pledge not to engage in another foreign war, but to address the cost of living right here at home.
Well, the other major story that is around this morning, it's dominating all the front pages, in fact, is the release of what are being called the Mandelson Files now.
Yeah, the first release of documents, and they're all about his appointment as US ambassador. They're going to be pretty uncomfortable reading for the Prime Minister. I just want to bring some of them to you because, obviously, it's all about the content, right? It's all about what is in these documents. And the first one I want to show you, this is a two-page vetting document that Keir Starmer received. It looks like a lot of words, but just look at these, because this is the key bit here. They reference a 2019 report that made clear that Lord Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein maintain a particularly close relationship, and that is even after Epstein's conviction for a child sex offence. So it is there in black and white. Keir Starmer was told, he was aware of the ongoing relationship. This is the next one I want to show you here, because it wasn't just the 2019 report. He was also advised by others who raised red flags about the process, including this man here, Jonathan Powell, someone who was very knew Mandelson well through the Blair years, also, of course, the Prime Minister's national security advisor. He said the whole process felt weirdly rushed. He also raised concerns about the individual and reputation as well to Morgan McSweeney. So there you have the Prime Minister's national security advisor, Jonathan Powell, raising multiple red flags about that appointment. Now, the last one, this is about the payout. So we know, of course, that Peter Mandelson received a payout of above £70,000 from the government. But the detail is, I mean, this is really quite something. He actually asked for £547,201 because of the damage to his reputation, that the second cost, extraordinary detail coming out there from Peter Mandelson. But look, I think what it does show is that the government will try and say that they didn't get enough information, that they were lied to by Lord Mandelson. But a lot of this information we now know was in the vetting, and Keir Starmer and those at Number 10 were aware of it.
That $500,000 or more payout is like acting like a football manager. I haven't finished my contract, so pay the rest of it off.
Yeah.
Which is eye-watering. Alex Rogers is here, our political correspondent. And this isn't an end to it, Alex, is it? Because they're expecting more files to come out at some point in the future too.
Exactly, yeah, there's going to be potentially even more damaging than this. I mean, I was quite surprised. I thought maybe the documents released yesterday might be quite limited, but I think what was kind of so devastating about it was just how plainly they laid out the risks that appointing Mandelson posed, and that line again from Jonathan Powell. He's a really trusted senior figure, and I think there are questions. Why didn't Keir Starmer listen to him? And I think with the documents being laid out so plainly, it does sort of, I think, blow apart the Prime Minister's narrative that he wasn't given a full picture, really, because it did explain how close Epstein and Mandelson were. And this whole saga just brings up all of the row from last month, which really cost Keir Starmer his job. I was speaking to a minister yesterday who was saying it's also damning. I don't see how he survives. And going on to say that really the only thing that's stopping him from losing his position at the moment is the fact you've got local elections in May and none of his rivals are ready. So back in the spotlight again, and not in a good way.
Camilla Badenoch, of course, as you'd expect, has been making political capital out of this. This is what she had to say.
This is yet another indictment of Keir Starmer's judgment. He wants to make this all about Peter Mandelson asking for money. The fact is, he wouldn't have been paying out that severance package if he hadn't appointed him in the first place. And the vetting that we have now seen, the documents that we have now seen, have shown that the Prime Minister should never have made this decision. He has not been honest with the country. He's not been honest with Parliament about what he knew. Now he's complaining about the severance package, but the fact is he's the one who signed it off in the first place.
The severance package, my favourite tweet from yesterday was someone saying any women ever questioning about whether they should ask for a pay rise that should look at Peter Mandelson. I mean, it is extraordinary. He wanted more than £500,000 because the reputational damage of his sacking.
Yeah, and I think Labour have really honed in on the severance demand of Peter Mandelson to kind of paint him as a uniquely bad character, I think, to try and almost say, look, how we were blindsided. This guy has the gall to ask for the severance payment. That's the kind of person that we're dealing with. But again, it does just bring it back to the fact that Keir Starmer chose to appoint him.
No one would want to put themselves in Peter Mandelson's shoes right now, but if you did, you'd think, well, he had nothing to lose. He's going to ask for that, isn't he? Asking it and getting are two different things. And he's still been paid £75,000, by the way, so it's not like he walked away entirely empty-handed.
Yeah, this is, in some ways, I guess, the fact that he asked him for more is useful cover for the government, who did end up paying him what, for most people, would be a pretty hefty sum of money, right? Alex, thanks very much.
Now, we've talked a lot about student loans on the programme and concerns that the system is unfair, and remains so, actually, because of the high interest that many graduates are still having to pay, paying it but not even chipping away at the sum they borrowed. In fact, quite often it's going up as they're trying to pay it off. Now, Parliament is launching a new inquiry to explore just how fair or not the student loans system is.
Let's bring in our correspondent, shall we, to try and talk a bit more about this. Graham is here. So, I mean, look, it's been, I think, frankly, most people would say a bit of a scandal for a while. Parliament is now trying to get to grips for it. What's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a multi-billion-pound issue. Many students now leaving university with upwards of £50,000 worth of debt, just trying to kind of going into it to make a better lives for themselves, but coming out with that real burden. And this inquiry, this investigation, is going to look into what's known as Phase 2 loans. They were issued to students from England in between 2012 and 2023, and it sees graduates who start earning above around £30,000 paying back 9% of their salary each month as repayment of that loan. Crucially, though, it's the interest rate. As you say, it's set at the retail price index, plus then up to 3%, depending on what someone's earning. So it's seeing some graduates, despite, saying goodbye to quite a significant proportion of their paycheck, actually see those debts rising. And the Treasury Select Committee Chair, Meg Hillier, she's saying that they are going to investigate whether those goalposts have been moved.
It's the RPI thing, isn't it, that's the problem, the retail price index, which is not used to measure inflation in any other way. That's the CPI. So that bit in itself is pretty outdated, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been quite a criticised measure of inflation, actually, particularly at the moment where inflation, well, we might be about to see it go up significantly again, but in the recent years it's been incredibly high. And then that is one of the questions they're going to... Some people are saying, well, maybe we should take a look at how these interest rates are calculated. Others are saying, actually, the threshold at which people start paying this thing should be made higher, because that will help lower and middle income earners. But some of the things they're going to ask is, were students well informed enough when they were getting into these loans? How is it affecting their day-to-day finances? Now, they're asking them to reach out to provide evidence to this Treasury Select Committee, either via direct submission or also via a survey. But it's also, again, the debate reignited at the last budget. They said, Rachel Reeves, that they were going to freeze the threshold. As I say, Kemi Badenoch actually has called the whole system a scam, although, remember, 2012 Phase 2 loans, they were bought in under a Conservative-led government. Others believe the interest rate should be, calculation should be changed, but again, it continues to be a really live issue, and Rachel Reeves said actually they've decided to prioritise spending elsewhere.
Yeah.
So,
well, at least the debate's happening.
Yeah.
Good to have you on the programme. Thanks, Graham. Well, we can speak now to the Paymaster General and Cabinet Office Minister, Nick Thomas Symonds. Great to have you on the programme. Thanks for being with us. Look, we're going to talk about Mandelson, obviously. The extraordinary tranche of files released yesterday. You're announcing some changes to the vetting process. What are you doing?
Well, firstly, Sophie, it is good to join you on your show, as always. But firstly, let me just take that point regarding security vetting, because I think people will have seen from the documents, and we can read about the various dates that particular vetting took place, what's called DV, this developed vetting, which is a really important form of really, it is quite intrusive, but hugely important that we do it type of vetting. You'll also see what's referred to as strap vetting in the documents, which is a very high level of vetting for very, very secret material. And I think you'll see in the documents that the processes weren't fully completed by the point at which the appointment, not the appointment, but actually taking up the post of ambassador to Washington took place. I think we're saying, first of all, that this process has to be fully completed before people take a post. But I think there is also perfectly legitimately now questions to be asked about that process, and absolutely saying that we shouldn't just be moving on from this, whether it's in terms of vetting or indeed standards in public life. We're also looking at things around lobbying, around transparency, financial disclosures of ministers. It's hugely important that collectively we learn the lessons. That's exactly the work that the Prime Minister is leading.
Can I put it to you that the problem wasn't actually the vetting process? The problem was ignoring what the vetting process said. Because in the document, which I admit was it wasn't an expansive document, but it said, it included the report that said that Peter Mandelson had a particularly close relationship with Epstein after his child sex offence conviction. The Prime Minister was told that Mandelson had stayed at Epstein's house in New York while he was in jail on charges of soliciting a minor for prostitution, and continued to have connections to him until at least 2014. So, by talking about the vetting process, it feels a bit like you're learning the wrong lessons. That it was there, but you just ignored it.
Well, there are lessons on the security vetting, which is obviously a separate process from the due diligence. I think it's really important we do learn those lessons. In terms of the due diligence document, Sophie, that you're referring to, of course, that raised concerns. It says in it about Peter Mandelson had reportedly stayed at Jeffrey Epstein's house at that time. There's a quote in there from Lord Mandelson's spokesperson about the nature of the relationship. That, of course, prompted questions, as you would expect it to do. And I'm sure any of your viewers who look at this document, and you can look at it quite openly, would also prompt serious questions as well. So the Prime Minister then did put those questions. Just finish at this point, sorry. Okay. The Prime Minister then did put those, ordered to be put questions to Lord Mandelson. He has said, the Prime Minister has said he was misled. He deeply regrets believing the reassurances he was given. But of course, that document isn't before us today, and it isn't before us because we've been told by the Metropolitan...
Can I just come in, please? Because I think that there is a point there that I really need to come back on, because it does feel to me like you're almost trying to say that we didn't do anything wrong here, because you're saying the Prime Minister was lied to, that he was misled. It was all Peter Mandelson's fault. The Prime Minister had a document that said he continued a relationship with a convicted paedophile, right? That is there in the document. He was advised by his national security advisor, Jonathan Powell, by the top civil servants at the Foreign Office, and he didn't listen to them. So you have got to take some responsibility here. Will you admit that the Prime Minister did something wrong?
The Prime Minister has taken responsibility for this. The Prime Minister has accepted that he made a mistake in appointing Lord Mandelson. And most importantly, the Prime Minister has apologised about this decision to Jeffrey Epstein's victims, who have to be re-traumatised and go through the memory of their terrible experiences every time we have a public debate around this. So the Prime Minister has taken responsibility. There's no doubt about that. And that is also one of the reasons why we are now looking...
What exactly has he apologised for? What has he taken responsibility for?
He has apologised for believing what was said to him by Peter.
It feels like if you're apologising for being lied to, for me that doesn't really feel like much of an apology.
Well, it is.
What is he apologising for exactly? Just for being lied to by Mandelson?
Well, it is heartfelt, Sophie. I've known Keir Starmer for many, many years, and I know both in his professional life, but also as Prime Minister, how important addressing violence against women and girls is to him. And I know, because I've obviously seen him in recent weeks, how much he regrets this appointment. He acknowledges, takes responsibility for it, and has acknowledged the mistake that was made. But it isn't just about saying that, hoping that somehow this is going to go away. That absolutely isn't the Prime Minister's approach. It isn't the government's approach. Our approach is to look at the serious things that this whole episode, that the activities of this vile paedophile Jeffrey Epstein has thrown up around power structures and how we can do more to raise standards in public life. That's the determination the Prime Minister has now going forward.
If the government is so concerned about violence against women and girls and the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, why did Peter Mandelson get a payout of £75,000?
Look, I frankly share the moral outrage that Peter Mandelson is still in possession of that £75,000. Now, you can look at the documents, you can see on a value for money basis why that decision was made. There was an original request for £547,000 that was negotiated down to 75. There was a risk of an employment tribunal, which of course is generally speaking, you can't recover your legal costs even if you win. So you can absolutely see on a numbers basis, a value for money basis, why that decision was made. But Sophie, from a moral point of view, it is incredibly difficult to even think that that money is still being retained. So what I would say is do the decent thing, do the honourable thing, donate that money to charity. And I would suggest perhaps a charity supporting victims might be appropriate.
Can I just quickly ask you on Iran as well? Because we have seen more strikes overnight. We've seen the oil prices soaring, 100 ships a day normally passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Now it is down to less than 5. How concerned is the government that this is going to turn into a protracted conflict and have an impact on the cost of living?
Well, we are very concerned, both about security, but also indeed about the possible impact on the cost of living. That's why the Prime Minister's leadership has been so careful and considered, putting the British national interest first. That's why the Prime Minister is steering the course he is through the conflict. That's why we are, of course, defending our nationals in the Middle East, nearly 300,000 nationals in the Middle East. It's absolutely right we do that, but also showing vigilance on the cost of living. Our economic stability, long built, hard built by the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, will help us to weather the particular storm. But we are also very conscious of the price of petrol at the pumps. We've already extended the 5p cut in fuel duty to September, trying to make sure that we continue to monitor that situation. So putting both national security first, but looking at measures on the cost of living too.
OK, thank you very much. Good to have you on the programme. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's the Jonathan Powell thing, isn't it, that really sticks out. He's quoted in these files, not our words, but quoted as saying the whole Mandelson appointment was weirdly rushed. Seemed obvious at the time. It's blindingly obvious now.
Yeah, this is it. And I think, you know, there was knowledge at the time, obviously, Jonathan Powell. Then you had the chief civil servant at the Home Office raising concerns as well. So, it wasn't just something that no one was aware of. No. I think that is the problem for them, and the payout.
All to do with the fallout of decisions made in the US, of course, the Mandelson Files, and it's the same with Iran for the government as well. We'll have the latest on that after the break.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to. Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think is really unusual? Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Iran has launched what it's calling a wide-scale wave of strikes overnight, focusing on neighbouring countries and the Strait of Hormuz. Joining me now to discuss all of this and all the ramifications for us in the UK is the former British ambassador to Libya and Jordan, Peter Millett. Peter, great to see you. It would be good to start off by just setting out the landscape in terms of the risks to the UK from all of this, as you see it.
I think the main risk is economic. We're already seeing oil prices rising, petrol pump prices rising, and that's going to have an impact on inflation. The fewer tankers that can get through the Straits of Hormuz is going to lead to a spike. We're already seeing a spike in oil prices, and that's going to hurt people's pockets. It's going to hurt Rachel Reeves' plans for the economy.
In terms of the price of a barrel of oil going up above $100, we're not in uncharted territory there, but the Israelis are warning of $200 for a barrel of oil, and that really is uncharted territory. Can the UK deal with that kind of oil price?
Well, we do have oil reserves, and we can release, and Europe is also can release oil reserves to try and moderate the price. But the only country that can increase production to control prices is Saudi Arabia, and most of their exports would go through the Straits of Hormuz. So, that's uncharted territory. I don't know where it's going to lead to.
Because when you hear the rhetoric from the US, as far as their energy needs are concerned, they're largely self-sufficient, so it doesn't impact them in the same way.
No, but it does increase their gas prices as well, because our own home gas prices, we've changed from, or Europe has changed from Russian gas to gas and LNG from Qatar and so forth. So that's going to have an impact on gas prices across Europe and the rest of the world.
Let's talk, Peter, about the diplomacy around all of this. Prior to the action being started by Israel and America, there were negotiations happening with Iran about diminishing its nuclear ambitions. Do you think those talks were done in good faith, or did the Americans, perhaps alongside the Israelis, think that they were just waiting for the moment to strike anyway?
I suspect the latter is correct. But the Omanis were busy in Geneva with Witkoff and Jared Kushner. The idea that those two can negotiate a nuclear deal, the 2015 deal was negotiated by hundreds of experts who understood the nuclear industry, enriched uranium and so forth. And the fact that negotiations were still going on, I was always trained to say that war only happens when negotiations collapse. And negotiations had not collapsed. The Omanis thought that there was still scope to come back to the table.
Yeah, and as a result, Oman has largely avoided any incoming fire from Iran, unlike neighbouring countries, of course. Do you think there's room to get back round the negotiating table, or has faith been destroyed? I mean, the fact that Ali Khamenei's son is now, Mujtaba, is now the Ayatollah, Donald Trump, of course, remains the president, having previously torn up that nuclear agreement with Iran in the 2010s, the late 2010s. Do you think they will ever get back round the table, or is that...
I hope they do, because negotiations are the only way out of this crisis, and the risk of further escalation, I think, is very high. It's not clear what Donald Trump's off-ramp is. Can he declare victory? He's changed the regime. He's stopped many, many missiles, destroyed a lot of ballistic missiles and so forth. He could declare victory. Will Netanyahu accept declaration of victory? And actually, for the regime itself, survival is victory. So there's no easy way out of this, I'm afraid, and the risk of further escalation is very high.
Peter, let's just finish off by talking about off-ramps, lingo that people may not realise means trying to find a way out of this, of course. Hearing what Donald Trump has said in the past 24, 48 hours, commentators are saying it sounds like he is looking for one himself. I mean, for him, he wants to declare victory and call an end to this, especially from his perspective. American bodies are being brought back to the USA wrapped in the stars and stripes. Do you think that means a more likely, quicker end to this than not?
Well, I hope it does, because I think, going back to the economic impact, if oil prices for the ordinary American begin to go up, or energy prices begin to go up, and inflation increases, then the impact on the midterms would hurt the Republican Party. And I'm sure Donald Trump is a very wise politician in terms of his antenna for local opinion. He'll be looking at that and thinking that he needs to put an end to this.
Peter, it's really great to have you with us. Really great to get your expertise and insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, let's return, shall we, to the other big story we've been talking about today, the release of the Peter Mandelson Files. And we're joined now by the former Labour MP, Dennis McShane, and the man who, I guess, knows Peter Mandelson pretty well.
I do, because we were both in the ante-room of the Labour Party National Executive Committee, it was called, or head office in Walworth Road, in 1985, to be chosen, or not, in my case, to be Director of Communications for the Labour Party. And I was so glad Peter got it, because 100 times better at it than me. I had a ticket to Washington in my pocket. I went off to spend the next 10 years poncing around the world, overthrowing nasty regimes in South Africa and South Korea and so on. So, yeah, worked with Peter, I like Peter, yeah. But he's Peter.
Do you still like him?
I don't, mate, I'm not judgmental. I mean,
why not?
Because I'm not pompous. I mean, if I want to be judgmental about journalists, then I could really have a long list. But I decided a long time ago as an ex-journalist, it was a bit sort of silly. So he's made a number of mistakes. But the interesting thing for me is, why could 4 Labour leaders, starting with Neil Kinnock, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, Keir Starmer, seem unable to live without him?
But I'm sorry to push this point about judgment. I mean, mistakes is one thing. Catastrophes, one after the other, is another. Why can't you?
Well, no, of
judge
course
him
I
for
think
that?
he's wrong. It's because all that stuff is, for heaven's sake, Epstein inveigled his way right into the heart of the royal family. Did they judge him?
Well, they did. They did judge him, to be honest. They chucked him out of the royal family.
At the end, but, I mean, you know, I'm just saying, morally dumping on people for making mistakes, for adultery, for leaving their wives.
I think that's a bit. And also, you talk about criticising journalists, which I'm here for, right? You know, we are not whiter than white in any means the unjust.
Right,
but I think that
Peter
I think that someone who is, maintains a friendship with someone who's convicted of a child sex offence, I think that's a different level of judgment, right?
Peter is wrong, and I'm sure he is kicking himself. I hope he's not listening to me, and he'll be kicking himself for the rest of his life. But the interesting thing is I think, not an individual. It's lovely to say it's all about Peter Mandelson. It isn't. It's about the Prime Minister and previous Prime Ministers, because I was there when Peter was almost literally fired on the floor of the House for mistakes he made then.
Can we talk about the culture in Parliament, in the Labour Party in the 2000s? I don't want to go over old ground with your own conviction. And
it's all right, the BNP would be delighted if you did it. They're the only ones who made a complaint. And the Metropolitan Police cleared me, but a certain Director of Public Prosecutions reversed the Met's decision.
And you pleaded guilty, I think, didn't you?
For God's sake, you have to.
Right.
I mean, give me a break. I mean, you...
But anyway, listen...
Anyway, all right, you want to talk about me?
No, but... It'd be wrong to ask a question I'm about to ask without alluding to that fact.
Perfectly fair.
But we've dealt with it. You've answered that. The point being was, what was the culture like in the 2000s that led to some people, like Peter Mandelson, thinking they can get away with things, whether it be a loan from a mate for a house or, potentially giving passports to people who didn't quite deserve them. Was this part of the wider culture, or was it specific to people like him?
I think specifically to people like him, he wasn't called out sufficiently. Let me be very clear. Peter at that time, and probably still, is Mr. Marmite in the Labour Party, except there are very few people who love him, but an awful lot of people who hated him. But there were 3 or 4, I don't want to repeat their names again, who relied on him, who felt that his insights and his advice, or whatever you like to call it, was important.
Who are you talking about?
I've already mentioned them, the 4 leaders of the Labour Party, 3 of whom were Prime Ministers. I wrote at the time he was being sent to consider from Washington. I said, if he wants to go and become a hotel keeper in Washington, be my guest. Let me explain. A UK ambassador, and I was a minister responsible for relationships with the United States for the Foreign Office for a number of years. A UK ambassador has no access to the president. He gets to see him if the monarch arrives, the Queen, now the King, or the Prime Minister arrives. And if he goes in with the Prime Minister, there will be about 20 super-duper foreign policy people.
Except, Dennis, within days of being appointed, he was stood in the Oval Office behind Donald Trump being complimented for his accents. That's not entirely the case, is it?
You present your credentials. OK, that's the other little photo call. And, I mean... Donald Trump recognised a fellow player, didn't he?
Which may be why he got the job in the first place.
Friend of Epstein.
Well, indeed that point as well. But trust me, a British ambassador, I know they're superb professionals. They work so hard. They train themselves. The best of the brightest are sent to Washington unless they're political appointments. They don't influence American policy one jot.
Can I ask about Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister? Because the defence from Number 10 is Keir Starmer is deeply, deeply sorry that he was lied to by Peter Mandelson and that he was misled by Peter Mandelson. I guess people will look at the vetting documents, they'll look at the warnings from people like Jonathan Powell, they'll look at the fact he was sacked before. Do you think it holds water?
Well, Peter was appointed Director of Labour Communications in 1985, and believe me, by 1986, he'd made so many enemies in the Labour Party. Why? Because he wanted to make it electable. Other people, like Michael Foot at the time, or Tony Benn, or later Jeremy Corbyn, I could rattle off names, wanted to make Labour unelectable.
But Keir Starmer's judgment, is that a problem?
Oh, very much. I heard the Labour MP for Hull, Carl Turner, who's a friend of Peter, on the radio earlier this morning, really excoriating him on the question of judgment. The difficulty is that Keir was a very brilliant human rights lawyer, but he didn't have any training, apprenticeship in the craft of doing something called politics. And politicians have a nose. That said, Tony's had to fire Peter over taking the loan that you mentioned, but promptly waits a year or two, brings him back to one of the most important British overseas or foreign jobs as UK Commissioner in Brussels. And then Gordon Brown didn't like Peter because he was close to Tony Blair. But my goodness, he feels he's going to be the man who'll save the Gordon Brown premiership.
Do you think he'll make another comeback finally?
Stop it, Matt. Come on.
I mean, there was an intake of breath there.
No. I remember after the second firing, I was up in the loo just above the chamber with the chief whip. I said, well, you know, Jesus rose after the third day. Can Peter come back for the third time? How long is he out for? About a week.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, the world is a crazy place, but you'd think surely that's
no. But the real problem remains, as always. For example, why did Keir Starmer sign off on the abolishing the winter fuel allowance for old people? I mean, the anger on the doorstep. I'm out canvassing every day. I was out last night for our big local elections here in London on May the 7th, and it's walking uphill when those kind of misjudgments are made.
Yes, well, that's when the judgment will be made, isn't it? I think a lot of people think. Dennis, really great to have you join us, and thanks for being so candid, by the way, with some of those answers. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Let's look now, shall we, at how the weather's shaping up.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
The next few days are going to bring strong winds, showers and longer spells of rain, and it is turning colder as well. There'll be a fairly mild, windy morning ahead with locally severe gales over northern and western coasts and hills. Central and southwestern Britain and Ireland and the south and northern Ireland will see prolonged rain taking over too, while the northwest will see early rain clearing to sunny spells and blustery showers. They'll be heavy at times and wintry on the hills. Central and southeastern England, meanwhile, look mainly dry.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, all prices are on the rise again. We're going to be looking in a few moments' time about the impact the war is having on us all here in the
UK. We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders.
It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbors, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days, as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical.
Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history.
the spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbors that harbor decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day.
Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate.
It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching tonight on The Wrap. We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why.
He did know what he was doing.
Both agree on that, can we?
No.
Can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable? What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree. And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Hello again. Now, oil prices have nudged above $100 a barrel again this morning, despite the fact that all these countries have agreed to release a record amount of oil from their emergency reserves that was supposed to bring prices down.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be impacting the markets yet, and Iran is warning it could rise to as much as $200 a barrel. I'm not sure it's ever been that high. So does this mean we're all going to be paying more for our fuel than for our energy? Our economics and data editor Ed Conway has been taking a look.
Some pretty extraordinary news. Just recently, the International Energy Agency, which is this body, it's the group for developed economies to deal with energy shocks like this, has just announced the biggest intervention it's ever made in energy markets. And what they're doing is they're releasing, and when I say they, that's kind of rich countries around the world, they're releasing an unprecedented amount of oil stockpiles. This is basically emergency oil supplies onto the global market to try and deal with what's happening with the oil price. But here's the interesting thing. If you look at the oil price, and this is just looking over the last few days, obviously it went up really sharply, up above $100 a barrel on Monday. Donald Trump came out and said the war is complete, or words to that effect, and then it came down pretty sharply after that. But here's what's striking, OK? So we just had this news of the IEA stock release. Look at what happened to the price afterwards. Basically, it did nothing. OK, and that raises the question, why is that? And part of the answer comes back to the flows of oil around the world and how much we have right now. Now, the big picture here is global crude oil demand is about 100 million barrels of oil a day. And with the Strait of Hormuz being closed, basically 15 million of those barrels have kind of gone. You know, you're not easily able to get hold of them. And so all of this is about trying to fill that gap. And when you look at the Strait of Hormuz, so look at the area here, so that is the area through which shipping's not passing at the moment. Most of the world's oil, or kind of 20% of the world's oil, goes through there. There are pipelines all around the region, raising the question, could you just get it into through those pipelines instead of shipping it out? Well, you can get a certain amount out of this pipeline that goes across Saudi Arabia, the East-West pipeline. There's another pipeline over here that goes kind of from that part of the UAE to that part, to Fujairah. And there is a bit of capacity, so you can get extra 5 million barrels a day out of that one, an extra 0.7 million out of that one. Add that up, OK, and that gap I was talking about earlier, 15 million barrels, you're starting to get towards it. And here's what's kind of striking. You're still 9.25 million barrels short. But if you look at this figure that we just got from the IEA, the really important chart isn't about 400 million barrels, which is the total amount they say they're going to release, but it's just how much they're planning to do each day. And in previous episodes like this, it's been about 2 million barrels a day. This time around,
It might well be more. Analysts think potentially, the IEA hasn't confirmed this, but analysts think potentially 4, maybe even 5 million barrels of oil a day. If that's the case, add that to this kind of shortfall, and instead of being kind of 7 million barrels short, we're kind of 5 or so million barrels short. So you see we're starting to get to close that gap. But even so, there is a gap, and that's part of the reason why oil prices are still so high. You have a shortage of oil flowing around the world, and so all around the world, you're starting to see the consequences. In India, in Mangalore, one of the refineries has issued a force majeure note, so basically kind of cancelling contracts. Elsewhere in India, supplies of LPG, so liquefied petroleum gas, they've been rationed. And then also look in places like Thailand, in Vietnam, employees have been urged to work from home. And that's before you count on what's happening closer afield in Europe. We know what's happening to petrol prices in the UK. In Germany, there's been a clampdown on petrol prices. And those kind of measures are expected only to continue as oil prices remain high in the coming days.
Conway explaining it all there. And of course, the country who's going to be keeping a very, very close eye on the cost of living is the US, and in particular, the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. If you're wondering why Wolf isn't here, by the way, he is over in the States. He's interviewing Scott Bessent. We'll be playing a taster of his interview later on this evening when he's got it done. And then also the full thing will be on mornings on Friday.
Oh. I mean, I was wondering why I wasn't here. I thought it was because you thought I was fantastic. Obviously, he's up to other things, so it's news to me. No, I'm joking. Be good to see what Scott Bessent has to say. Certainly on the Iran situation, but also given the fact that he knew Peter Mandelson pretty well himself, didn't he?
I think there's going to be some very, very interesting things to come out of that interview, for sure. Lots to come.
We will have, lots to come, much more coming up after the break at the top of the next hour on all the top stories, Iran and Mandelson as well. Do stay with us here on Sky News.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Hello, good morning. It is 8 o'clock. You're watching Mornings on Sky News. I'm Sophie Ridge.
And I'm Matt Barbet. Good morning.
Iran carries out another wave of attacks targeting fuel as oil rises again above $100 a barrel.
Heavy shelling in Lebanon as Israel batters the capital where dozens of displaced families were sheltering.
An American investigation finds the US was likely responsible for a strike on a primary school that killed at least 165 people, mostly children.
Also this morning, we're going to dive into the Mandelson Files.
Some of the details about Peter Mandelson's appointment as US ambassador are now public, and they may throw the Prime Minister's leadership into deeper turmoil.
Good morning. Our top story today. Overnight, Iran has launched another wide-scale wave of strikes.
So let's bring you right up to date with everything you need to know this morning, because oil has been pushing up as well. In Bahrain, Iran attacked fuel tanks near the international airport, causing a large fire northeast of the capital, Manama. Bahrain, of course, is home to the US Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters.
2 oil tankers were also attacked in Iraqi waters, killing a crew member there. Iraqi officials say they appear to have been targeted by Iranian boats that were packed with explosives. And this morning, as Sophie mentioned there, oil prices have gone above $100 a barrel once more, despite the largest release of oil reserves by the world's energy watchdog.
Now, in the early hours this morning, at least 8 people were killed and 31 injured in an Israeli strike in Lebanon. There was no warning at the attack in central Beirut, and it was also an area where displaced families were sheltering. It's not known for having a Hezbollah presence.
Also, this just in, the US Central Command, CENTCOM, has released this footage online, on X in fact, saying the Iranian regime is losing air capability day by day. US forces aren't just defending against Iranian threats, we are methodically dismantling them, they said. It is unclear, though, when or where this video was filmed.
Well, Iran's president's also outlined his 3 conditions for peace. The first is a recognition of Tehran's legitimate rights, in his words. The second is payment of reparations. And the third is firm international guarantees against future aggression. He also warned the world should be ready for oil to hit $200 a barrel. Donald Trump's also been asked about America's war aims.
The main thing is we have to win this. They win it quickly, but win it. And there are many people, I'm just watching some of the news, most people say it's already been won. It's just a question of when. When do we stop? We don't want to let it regrow. And ideally would like to see somebody in there that knows what they're doing. In other words, they can build a country.
Let's just have a quick look at where we are now. And oil prices have crossed back that momentous $100 a barrel mark overnight. It was at its peak on Monday at $118 a barrel then, before it fell back on the announcement of that release of emergency reserves. But as you can see, it is still high. Look, Sophie, on the one hand, the Iranians would say be prepared for it to go to $200 a barrel. But when you see how the markets are reacting to the situation, you wonder if there's a bit more reality to that.
Honestly, this is it. I mean, the thing is, as well, you can see the risks. There was a footage today of the Thai-flagged vessel that was attacked as it was transporting oil, and people on board, big fire breaking out. It's an incredibly dangerous situation. And there was lots of discussion at the beginning of the war about whether Iran could actually technically close the Strait of Hormuz. Well, if they make it so dangerous that no vessels prepared to go through it, then that is effectively shut. Remember, I think around 100 vessels a day were passing through it before, right?
Yes, 20% of the world's supply. Let's head to the region now. We're going to speak with Sally Lockwood, who's in Dubai for us. Sally, great to see you. Still, and it's amazing, all these days in, quite a bit of activity where you are overnight again.
Yeah, hello to you again, Matt and Sophie. Forgive me for staring at my phone. I'm just getting news in at the moment from 2 separate sources who live in and around the financial district here in Dubai, which is known as DIFC, that there's been a drone attack there in the last 40 minutes or so, two sources reporting a loud bang near the metro area and that a drone reportedly has hit the ground in and around the vicinity of DIFC, which is Dubai's financial district, the equivalent of Canary Wharf here, if you like. And that's really significant because news emerged just yesterday that Iran said it was going to target banks and financial institutions in the Middle East that had American and Israeli interests. And following that, very shortly after, a number of banks and financial offices in the DIFC area evacuated their staff. One office sent around a notice to staff warning them to proceed to the nearest safe place away from the office, telling colleagues to remain at home to work for now. And I'm also hearing of a number of these offices that are looking to evacuate all of their staff out of the country along with their families in the coming days. I've been hearing that for some days now, but it does seem that the financial centre of Dubai is now potentially a target from Iran's attacks. And on top of that, of course, we've seen the disruption to shipping in the last 12, 13 days. I'm losing count. But, you know, we saw at least 3 vessels targeted in and around the Strait of Hormuz just yesterday. Another one has been targeted just at dawn this morning, south of where I am now, near Jebel Ali Port in Dubai. Another vessel targeted by a projectile, a fire on board. All the crew are safe. We've seen so many incidents like that around the Gulf because it's become so volatile with the Iranian military and the Revolutionary Guard attempting to block the Strait of Hormuz, that critical artery for global energy. But it's not just energy and shipping that they're targeting, and it's not just here in the UAE. Of course, we've seen energy infrastructure targeted across the Gulf in Qatar, Saudi, Bahrain, Kuwait. But here we are also seeing a real target from Iran on things like the international airport, anything that is a global artery for travel, connectivity. So Dubai is the busiest airport hub in the world normally, and we have seen a number of attempted drone attacks on the airport. Another one just yesterday in the vicinity, which injured 4 people. And then again, at some point overnight, we've had a number of emergency alerts overnight. And at some point, an apartment hotel block in the Dubai Creek area of Dubai, which is very close to the airport, was hit by a suspected drone. The building was evacuated, and I understand everyone is safe. But it's really interesting just to see the level of disruption. I've got someone messaging me at the moment who's in Dubai airport who said that around 7 a.m. there was another emergency alert, and all the passengers in the terminal were ordered to stand by a wall because it was deemed safer than being exposed in the middle of the terminal building or near a window. And these sorts of incidents are happening every day at the moment. And as I said, you know, I'm hearing of people that are being evacuated by their companies. And we had an update from the Australian government as well in the last 24 hours. They gave an update to their citizens in the Middle East. And it was worded like this: we're concerned this regional conflict is likely to continue and could escalate. If you wish to leave the Middle East, do not wait until it is too late. Leave now while commercial flights are available. So it seems certain banks, financial institutions, global businesses and governments like Australia are now urging their citizens and employees to leave countries like the UAE. And certainly what we're seeing now is potentially a campaign from Iran, not just to target military assets in the region, but anything that is going to disrupt the world order, shipping, airports, and now we're seeing potentially today banks and a financial centre as well.
Sally, thank you very much indeed. Always great to see you. And these are live pictures from Beirut this morning, the Lebanese capital. You can see smoke hanging over an area of it there. Our colleague, Cordelia Lynch, is in Lebanon and heading to the scene of the latest strike there. We're hoping to hear from her later on this morning.
Such a familiar sight, that smoke billowing over Beirut as the conflict continues. We've also learned more about one of the most devastating moments of the conflict so far, the strike on the school in Iran that killed at least 165 people, mostly children.
An American investigation has now found the United States was, in their words, likely responsible for what happened there. Our US correspondent David Blevins has more.
This is an ongoing investigation, so these are preliminary findings, but they are damning, that it is likely the United States fired the missile that hit the school. The word likely doing some heavy lifting there, given the mounting evidence. That the missile did not veer off course, as some have suggested, but the school was mistaken for a military target. And while the Defence Intelligence Agency here in the United States made the decision, Israel was involved in the process of selecting targets. That's all very difficult for President Trump. His press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, says he hasn't seen the report, but will accept the outcome of the investigation. He has been out and about in Ohio and Kentucky, trying to reassure people that he's addressing the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz and that oil prices will be falling again soon. Why? Well, it's midterm election year, and he was the president who won back the White House on a pledge not to engage in another foreign war, but to address the cost of living right here at home.
David Blevins there, and making the point as well about, Donald Trump 2.0 is much more focused on international issues that may not play very well at all with a domestic audience worried about, the price of the pumps.
Well, absolutely. I think when this started, that big question was, how does this align with an America First strategy? And I think a lot of the MAGA base are probably asking the same thing. I think yesterday he was out in one of the states talking about his economic strategy at the same time as all this is going on. So he's definitely got an eye on how it plays out at home with the economy.
Let's look now, shall we, at the other major story that we're covering this morning. It's dominated all of the front pages, the release of the Mandelson Files.
Yeah, the first release of documents about the appointment of Peter Mandelson as the UK's ambassador to Washington will make pretty uncomfortable reading for the Prime Minister.
I'm just going to get up and show you some of the detail, because we did get a decent chunk of documents released, although not all of them. This is the first one. So this is the two-page vetting document that was given to Keir Starmer and to Number 10. Lots of words in front of you here, but I want to draw your attention to this. It was a 2019 report that confirmed that Mandelson and Epstein, in their words, maintain a particularly close relationship, and that is after Epstein was convicted of a child sexual offence. So it's laid out there, it is clear. The second thing is it wasn't just his vetting document, he was also warned by some individuals, not least this guy, Jonathan Powell. Now, he, of course, worked very closely with Lord Mandelson throughout the Blair years. He's also the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor, so a guy you might think he should listen to. He said that the appointment was weirdly rushed. He also said he raised concerns about the individual and the reputational risk to Morgan McSweeney, Keir Starmer's advisor, who obviously took the opportunity to resign over his misjudgment. The third thing to show you, perhaps the most consequential thing that we didn't know before. Peter Mandelson asked for a payout, not just any payout, he asked for a payout of £547,201 for the reputational damage of his sacking. The problem, I guess, is that the government did still pay him £75,000, something I'm sure is going to be pretty controversial. Now, we did speak to the Paymaster General and the Cabinet Office Minister, Nick Thomas-Symonds, earlier on the programme. I was trying to get a sense of what exactly the Prime Minister is taking responsibility for. I think that there is a point there that I really need to come back on, because it does feel to me like you're almost trying to say that we didn't do anything wrong here, because you're saying the Prime Minister was lied to, that he was misled. It was all Peter Mandelson's fault. The Prime Minister had a document that said he continued a relationship with a convicted paedophile, right? That is there in the document. He was advised by his National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell, by the top civil servants at the Foreign Office, and he didn't listen to them. So you have got to take some responsibility here. Will you admit that the Prime Minister did something wrong?
The Prime Minister has taken responsibility for this. The Prime Minister has accepted that he made a mistake in appointing Lord Mandelson. Most importantly, the Prime Minister has apologised about this decision to Jeffrey Epstein's victims, who have to be re-traumatised and go through the memory of their terrible experiences every time we have a public debate around this. So the Prime Minister has taken responsibility. There's no doubt about that. And that is also one of the reasons why we are now looking...
What exactly has he apologised for? What has he taken responsibility for?
He has apologised for believing what was said to him by Peter.
Alex Rogers is here now, our political correspondent. You can hear in Sophie's interview there the government line, can't you? Insisting he said sorry, insisting he was lied to, when the latest files show that actually he was perhaps well advised in retrospect and didn't listen to it.
Yeah, the onus is all on how bad a character Peter Mandelson is, not on the fact that the Prime Minister believed him. It's quite passive, isn't it? Oh, I'm sorry I was lied to. I'm sorry I believed what he said, when there were lots of things laid out about why Peter Mandelson was the wrong appointment. And so that's the central thing that critics are honing in on, is all this detail was given to you. Your own national security advisor warned that this was a potential risk, and that was the choice, was to not act on those concerns.
Especially as Jonathan Powell, had served under Tony Blair in the new Labour government, was brought back in as a sensible, wise, experienced head.
Yeah.
For him to say this has been weirdly rushed and it seems like that hasn't been heard, well, that in itself is weird, isn't it?
I think that's a big question that MPs are asking, is why ignore Jonathan Powell and listen to Morgan McSweeney, obviously now the departed Chief of Staff of the Prime Minister? I think Jonathan Powell even warned about the risks it posed to McSweeney, and he was right about that, because Morgan McSweeney lost his job over this. So I think it's a really sticky issue for the Prime Minister, and he's going to continue to have to answer questions on it.
Alex, I'm interested in your assessment on where Keir Starmer's leadership is, because this was almost a resigning issue for Keir Starmer, right? You remember when it first came out, and you had Anna Sarwar, calling on him to go. All that thing happened. Is your sense that it's died away a little bit, or is it still there? That kind of maximum jeopardy for the Prime Minister.
I think that underlying vulnerability is still there, but I think he is saved by timing. That there's local elections in May, and no one really wants to get rid of him before that, because they're going to have to own these results that may be very difficult for the Labour Party. So he's kind of saved by the fact that his rivals aren't ready to go yet. But I mean, I was speaking to one minister who said he doesn't survive this. He can't survive this. It's so damning. So his leadership is still very precarious. And I think what's interesting is the Iran war has also almost kind of helped him a little bit. It's made him look statesmanlike. He seems to have been a bit vindicated in his kind of calm approach and not getting involved, especially when Donald Trump is behaving in quite an erratic way. And then this comes up as a reminder of the difficulties he's facing domestically, and maybe has less of a grip on.
It is a good point. The world stage is often a place of refuge, isn't it, for embattled prime ministers to look statesmanlike. Good to see you, Alex. Thanks very much indeed. More on Iran now. It's a busy day, of course. Joining us to discuss it is Roger Macmillan, the former Director of Security at Iran International. Good to see you. Look, a lot of people will be waking up this morning, as they perhaps have done over the past week or two, wondering about what the threat to our security is at the moment from Iranian actors. What do you think it is?
I think, we're now 13 days into a hot war with Iran. And everybody's rightly been focused on what is happening there, the missile strikes, the price of oil, the economic part. But there's a part that is playing out, and people don't really know about it too much, and that is the threat that the IRGC posed to us here in the UK through a number of sort of the soft influence networks, the media, the charities, etc., etc.
Yeah, let's just remind people what the IRGC is, Islamic Republican Guard Corps. I think I've got the title right there. Look, if you were looking at it through sort of, in layman's terms, they're almost like a mafia operation, aren't they? They're involved in so many businesses inside Iran and so much influence outside Iran. Is that a good way to characterise the way they operate and their influence?
Absolutely. They operate very much on the military side, as many people see. They have an organisation called the Quds Force, which is responsible for terrorist activities overseas, but also these days in Iran. But you're absolutely right. They also control very much the diplomatic element and, critically, the economic piece, with 30 to 40% of the economy being controlled by the IRGC in Iran.
And Roger, is this why it's going to be very hard maybe even impossible, to effect genuine regime change from the air inside Iran, especially as the new Ayatollah, Mujtaba Khamenei, is even closer to the IRGC than his father was?
Very much so. I think what we need to be looking at is destroying the political elites as opposed to necessarily the infrastructure. The political elites are the ones who control it, and they need to be looked at in terms of their finances and what happens there. You've seen, obviously, Mujtaba Khamenei reported has over £200 million worth of property alone in London, let alone the rest of Europe and beyond. And that is replicated across much of the sort of the senior leadership within Iran.
Yes, and some of that property in London people have been keen to focus on has pretty close proximity to the Israeli embassy, for example. Just talk about how, I guess the word is entrenched, that approach is here in the UK, and also what the government is or isn't doing about it compared to others.
I think we have to look at take the property. These have been owned by Khamenei for well over a decade. Owned to break sanctions, using state money that has been stolen from the people, and placed through very complicated, very complex sort of structures to hide where the money is coming from and who the ownership is. You also have to look at some of the media networks that are owned, controlled, and run by the state, many of which are not only just attack Iran or people in the UK, but also you're looking at other television channels which put their hate back into the rest of the GCC and beyond. The charitable commissions as well, notably the IHRC, the Islamic Human Rights Commission, is another one that I know has been looked at because it has received state money in terms of gift aid to the tune of something like £250,000.
Do you think, just Roger, to finish off, do you think then the government here is being too soft on these effectively Iranian actors, where others in other countries have proscribed, for example, declared as a terrorist organisation, things like the IRGC?
I think the IRGC needs to be prescribed immediately. And certainly, if they can't do the whole IRGC, then the Quds Force, the one who is actually responsible for conducting acts of terror overseas and certainly in the UK, that has to be prescribed now. But I would ask the government to look at how else they can reduce the influence by the IRGC and Iran in UK, and that is through Companies House, through shutting down known entities that take money from Iran, but also from Iran as proxies as well, such as Hezbollah and the Houthi, who also have a presence here in the UK. And we can do something about it. We should also be looking at Jonathan Hall's report and advancing that. He has given us the mechanism to effect these measures quickly, and these need to be advanced as quickly as possible.
I mean, just to pick up on that point, Roger, just to finish off, I mean, people will think of proscription in recent times. They'll think about the proscribing of Palestine Action, for example, and the debate around that. A lot of people disagreeing with that being a proscribed organisation. My point is, does proscription, can it work? Would it be useful in this regard? Would it make a difference?
I think it's an important point. It gives the government and the police the legal tools to bring people to justice for supporting the IRGC and the Iranian, so the Islamic Republic in the UK. But we also need to look at the economic measures as well, as I said, taking the assets, freezing assets, and actually using the sanctions regime to have a much greater impact.
Roger Macmillan, really appreciate you joining us here on Mornings on Sky News. Thanks so much.
Now, we talked an awful lot about student loans on this programme, and in particular, of course, those concerns the system's unfair because of the high interest that so many graduates are having to pay. And now Parliament's looking into it as well. They're launching a new inquiry to explore just how fair it is. We can bring in our correspondent Graham to chat a bit more about this with us. So what's going on?
Well, you know, this is a multi-billion pound issue. Many students leaving university now with over £50,000 worth of debt. It's something, as you say, we've spoken about a lot here. And ultimately, this inquiry now is going to focus particularly on what's known as Phase 2 loans. They were loans which were issued to students from England who went to university who started university in between 2012 and 2023, and it sees graduates who start earning over a threshold of around £30,000, paying back around 9% of their monthly salary as repayments. But crucially, what a lot of people are saying is unfair are the rate of interest that's charged. It can be, it tracks the retail price index plus up to 3%, depending on what it is exactly you're earning, and it goes up if your salary goes up. But ultimately, that means that people might be paying off, month after month after month, but barely chipping away at this loan because the interest rates are just so high. And that's something that the Treasury Select Committee are going to look at. Meg Hillier, the chair, is going to look at, they say, whether the goalposts have been moved between the time those kind of loan agreements were signed and whether students knew what they were getting into at the time.
Look, as a parent of a 16-year-old who is giving due consideration to perhaps going to university in the next year or so, the other effect of this is people will be wondering if it's actually worth it anymore. Now, if you're going to a top place, probably yes. If you're going to somewhere where a course has, is going to be difficult to get a job after that, then the knock-on effects of this loan thing make it less likely that people will take those choices. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, actually, over just the last 10 years, that's a debate that's been going on, isn't it? Like, is it worth going to university nowadays when that amount you could be loaned got stepped up from 3,000 and something to £9,000? People were asking, is it good enough? Is it worth the money? Plus now, of course, the interest payments as well. And that is something that the Select Committee are going to look at. They're going to be asking whether students were well informed enough when they took on that loan, whether it is affecting their day-to-day finances. And they're asking them, young people who are affected, to get in touch. They're going to be issuing surveys. They're going to be asking for direct submissions as well, up to around the middle of April. The debate, particularly, again, has been reignited because of the budget, the threshold at which, the last budget in November, the threshold at which you would start paying back those loans was frozen for 3 years. It was increased slightly, but frozen, so more people are going to be dragged into that bracket as inflation goes up. Kemi Badenoch has called the entire system a scam, although, of course, it was introduced during a Conservative kind of led government. Rachel Reeves has said any change needs to be fully costed, and they've chosen, at the moment, to prioritise things like the NHS defence.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. It's interesting what you're saying about the debate about value, because that's something that the Conservatives are talking about as well, that actually, we do have the stats that show what institutions and what subjects as well are value for money.
And also, and this is an interesting change in attitude, it is the transactional approach of students, and rightly so,
understandably,
to their course. I think we saw that case that was brought by students in London who got effectively a refund because they weren't getting what they were paid for during the pandemic. And, if you pay your money, you expect a service back in response, don't you?
I did English literature, and it's always right at the bottom of what is worth doing.
I'm old enough to know and be incredibly grateful that someone paid for my tuition, which feels like a long time ago now. I hope I did them justice.
Coming up, we're going to be talking to our political editor, Beth Rigby, about the government's files released on Peter Mandelson. That is coming up next.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They will be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live.
They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us?
Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office.
Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think is really unusual? Mornings with Ridge and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started. The Prime Minister under more pressure after the government released some of its files about the decision to employ Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the United States.
Yeah, these latest documents show that Keir Starmer was told that Peter Mandelson's friendship with Jeffrey Epstein continued until at least 2011, years after Epstein was first convicted.
Well, Beth is here. Beth, the government line has been Keir Starmer takes violence against women and girls very seriously. He is angry that he was lied to by Peter Mandelson. Do you think it goes deeper than that?
Well, look, I think there's a bit to unpack here. I mean, we've had the first tranche of these documents. The PM's defence has been, if I'd known what I had known now, at the time I would never have appointed him. He lied to me. We did not know the extent and depth of the relationship with Epstein. And the extent and depth of the relationship really was revealed in its full technicolor, wasn't it, with the dump of the Epstein files from the Department of Justice in the US, and that's when we learned the extent of the email exchanges between Mandelson and Epstein, and also that's when we found out that he had allegedly leaked confidential government sensitive information to Jeffrey Epstein when he was in the Brown administration, and he's now under criminal investigation for that, and he denies the charges. But if you go back to the Prime Minister and the nub of your question, this whole saga and the first dump of documents yesterday is really, really bad for Keir Starmer because, as you said, his argument is, I didn't know, but what you saw in that two-page vetting document was red flags raised, and you see it very clearly there in black and white. And although we know, because the PM said it in the House of Commons, that he was aware of the ongoing relationship, when you see it on that paper and it goes through the general reputational risk of the relationship, it talks about the fact that Mandelson had stayed in Epstein's townhouse reportedly, so it's reporting, it was actually the article originally in the FT by my colleague Jim Pickard, my former colleague Jim Pickard from the FT, I should say.
Yeah, not there anymore, Beth.
I'm not there, he's still there. But that he'd, he'd stayed in the house in 2009, he maintained a relationship with Epstein until 2011, and you see those red flags raised, you think, hang on a minute, what's the judgment call here? I'd say the other thing that was, there wasn't a smoking gun in these documents yesterday. There wasn't something that materially changed what we know, but it was a sort of fuse lit, if you like, because the thing that is really interesting, the thing I thought that was probably the most interesting thing, was what Jonathan Powell, the Prime Minister's national security advisor and former chief of staff, actually, to Tony Blair. So he knew Mandelson, he'd worked with him, and he had raised some concerns. It was reported that he had found the process weirdly rushed and unusual. And he had been told by Morgan McSweeney, then the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, that concerns had been addressed. So that, I think, was the most interesting thing, that actually within Number 10 there were different views from advisors.
You hear about this defence of I was lied to. You look at that video of him all smiles with Mandelson as he's taking that appointment, and you wonder if Keir Starmer is just too trusting and just perhaps lacking in scepticism. Why wasn't he asking more questions here?
I think that is the question everyone's asking, which is, to quote Alex Burkhardt in the House of Commons, does it beg a belief that the guy who was the former Director of Public Prosecutions, when confronted with this evidence, didn't have all his red lights flashing, thinking, even if Mandelson gives reasonable explanations, does this fit in with my brand as Prime Minister, as Sophie was saying, the Prime Minister that has campaigned on violence against women and girls, for example, and promised to put in a government of integrity. Look, I think the reason I said this is lit a fuse is this is just the beginning of this document, these documents being released. There are thousands of them, and we only had a very thin layer last night, or yesterday when they were released. The Prime Minister's defence rests on, I was deeply misled by Mandelson, and when the subsequent questions that we asked him in the vetting process are released, they're being withheld by the Met Police at the moment because of the investigation. The Prime Minister's argument and his team's argument is that he will be seen in a more sympathetic light. I think there's another question, though, whether actually it gets worse for him. And I say that because there will be a formal vetting process, that the details of that will come out. So what did that reveal? The fact that Mandelson might have been receiving confidential government documents before that vetting process was carried out. And I think actually when the further sets of documents come out, it could actually be even more damaging for the Prime Minister. And I think there are real questions about what the outcome is for him over this.
And it could happen at a more politically difficult time. Post-May, thinking about the May elections, thinking about leadership candidates being more ready, all that kind of thing. It feels like it's, as you say, lit the fuse. Beth, always good to have you on. Thanks for being on with us.
We're going to return to the war in the Middle East now, but we're going to focus on the UK's involvement.
Our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, is at Northwood Headquarters, a military base in northwest London. Debs, what more can you tell us about where you are and what the UK's involvement is in the conflict?
Well, I'm sadly not inside the headquarters. I'm on the outskirts in the freezing cold. But behind me, you can see that is it is Northwood. That's where the Permanent Joint Headquarters is located, which is like the main military operational headquarters for UK Armed Forces. And it's from there that commanders and other personnel direct military operations wherever they're taking place across the world. So, of course, you can imagine that the absolute primary focus at the moment is what's happening in the Middle East and directing those jets that we've got operating out of Cyprus and also out of Qatar that have been patrolling the skies and acting to shoot down drones. And there's also been these personnel on the ground that have been shooting down drones. But I do have a question as to how that one drone was able to get through our defences and hit the base at Akrotiri right in the early days of the war. Since that happened, there's been a huge amount of pressure on the government as to whether they were prepared enough for what would inevitably happen should the US and Israel start attacking Iran. So there are lots of questions, but clearly for the moment, in the immediate time, here at the headquarters, you can imagine they're working around the clock trying to make sure that British assets and interests in the region are as well protected as possible. And of course, we also have that warship, HMS Dragon, that finally set sail this week and is going to be heading towards the region. Maybe as well that Royal Fleet Auxiliary vessel, Lyme Bay, that is currently off Gibraltar. Talk about that being, well, that's been put on higher readiness to move, and whether that will head into the region as well. I'm sure we'll hear a decision on that soon.
Deborah, thank you very much indeed. We're going to speak now to the author and journalist George Monbiot, who joins us down the line. George, good to see you. Look, I know you've been quite vocal in recent weeks about the situation there, perhaps dispelling some rumours about your own position on things, not necessarily aligning with everything the Green Party wants to do, for example, when it comes to NATO membership and everything else. Given what's been happening in recent hours, past couple of days, what's your view on things?
Well, it's very clear that this is a war launched without clear objectives, without a clear framework, timeline, or outcomes. Even Donald Trump doesn't seem to know why he has launched this war on the coattails of Netanyahu in Israel. What we're seeing is a whole series of justifications which immediately fall apart. Oh, it's regime change. No, it's not regime change. It's to stop the nuclear program. Oh, we already stopped that. It's because there was an imminent threat. No evidence of an imminent threat. So all we are seeing, the only certain outcome of this war is death. Lots of people being killed. And that includes 175 people at the latest count when a school was bombed. This is a war crime. It's a war crime within a war crime because an illegal war like this, an act of aggression, was characterized by the Nuremberg tribunals as the supreme international crime.
The US talks about a possible threat to California from drones in terms of that missile hitting that school in southern Iran. They're now saying it likely was the US, perhaps based on outdated intelligence. But just to pick up your point there about the legality of the war, looking back at all the wars there have been, not many have been legal, have they?
That's very true, unfortunately. And of course, that includes the US-UK invasion of Iraq in 2003.
Well, that one's debated. I mean, that one is debated as to the legality of that, of course. I think
of course, there's always going to be someone coming along to debate it.
Yeah.
But a very wide range of international legal experts, including in the United Nations, have said, crystal clear, this was an illegal war. There's only two reasons why you can go to war. If you're acting in self-defense, plainly we were not, or if you have a clear UN Security Council resolution, which we did not have. And it's just worth reminding viewers that during that war, 700 primary schools were bombed.
Yeah, it's particularly timely when you think about the school bombing that we've been talking about an awful lot in the programme this morning as well. Donald Trump has been pretty angry, I think it's fair to say, with Keir Starmer's initial decision to not let him use UK bases. He said he's no Churchill. In your opinion, is it a good thing that Keir Starmer is no Churchill?
Well, very much so. I mean, I'm not renowned as a defender of this government, but I'm glad that Starmer held back, and particularly that he's no Churchill, because it was Churchill who collaborated with the US in 1953 to overthrow the democratic government of Mohammad Mossadegh in order to stop that government from making sure that Iranian oil belonged to Iranians. The British wanted it to continue pumping it out, taking the wealth out of Iran. Mossadegh wanted to nationalize it. Churchill then went to the US, the CIA in particular, and said, we must overthrow this government. They did. They launched 2 coups. The second of them succeeded. The result was that they brought back the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, with his utterly brutal, horrible, undemocratic regime, which was overthrown in 1979 because of people's disgust, and many of them cited the 1953 coup that Churchill instituted as their reason for overthrowing the Shah's regime, brought in the Ayatollahs, and we are where we are today as a result. So we get involved in countries about which we know little. We plunge in, wade in, saying, here we have this objective. We don't even have an objective in this case, but here we have this short-term aim that we're trying to achieve in this country, and it causes a long-term crisis.
Just to look, I think you're right actually to talk about the Shah in the way that you do. I think there's been a bit of revisionism going on perhaps on that, right? But at the same time, if you look at where people in Iran have been now, tens of thousands of them, thousands of them going onto the streets, being gunned down, being murdered by one of the most brutal dictatorships in the globe. Is there a humanitarian imperative, I guess some would say, to try and help people in Iran affect the regime change that they deserve?
Look, I would love to see that horrible regime come to an end. It's utterly brutal, cruel, and murderous to a huge extent. This attack will do nothing of the kind. If anything, it seems to be strengthening the regime. That's generally what happens when there's an external attack. People rally around the government. It's going to make it even harder for people to overthrow this regime. In fact, large numbers of people are being executed now, and the government's calling them foreign collaborators. Because they're saying, well, anyone who's against our regime must be in favor of the US-Israel attacks, therefore they're foreign collaborators, therefore we can execute them for treason. So it's not doing the Iranian people any good at all, quite the contrary.
George, really appreciate you joining us on Mornings here on Sky News. Good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
I think that we touched upon there children being killed. Yeah. And wherever that happens, you know, whether it's Gaza, Sudan, now in the region, it really, I mean, of course, it's upsetting. UNICEF has actually put some figures out this morning. 1,100 children reported injured or killed in the Middle East since the first US-Israeli strikes began on the 28th of February. Just give you the exact numbers. That includes 200 children killed in Iran, 91 in Lebanon, 4 in Israel, and 1 in Kuwait. And what is interesting, in the build-up to a lot of this, Trump was focusing on, and as he has done in Ukraine, lives being lost. That does seem to resonate with him to a degree.
Yeah, I think that is it. And particularly, of course, when those lives of children, by definition, innocent in conflict, right? Yeah. Matt, thanks for bringing those figures. It's really important to kind of dwell on them throughout the programme as well. Let's update you now, shall we, on the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
So the next few days will bring some strong winds, showers and longer spells of rain. And it's going to turn colder, if that wasn't enough for you. There's going to be a fairly mild, windy morning with locally severe gales over northern and western coast and hills. Central and southwestern Britain, Ireland and the south of Northern Ireland will see prolonged rain taking over, I'm afraid. The northwest will see some early rain, clearing to sunny spells, but some blustery showers too. They'll be heavy at times and wintry on the hills. Central, southeastern England, mainly dry.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Stay with us. In a moment, we'll continue to look at the impact of the war and more specifically us in the UK and the economy here.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood is rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders.
It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbors, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days, as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical.
Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history.
The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbors that harbor decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day.
Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate.
It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching.
Tonight on The Wrap.
We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why.
He did know what he was doing.
Both agree on that, can we?
No.
No.
You can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable? What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree.
And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Hello again. Now, oil prices have briefly nudged above $100 a barrel again this morning, despite countries agreeing to release a record amount of oil from their emergency reserves, which was supposed to bring those prices down.
Well, it actually could be a portent of things to come, because Iran is warning that it thinks prices could rise to as much as $200 a barrel. I don't think that's ever been seen before. So does that mean we're all going to be paying more for fuel and energy? Sounds likely, doesn't it? Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, has been taking a look.
Some pretty extraordinary news. Just recently, the International Energy Agency, which is this body, it's the group for developed economies to deal with energy shocks like this, has just announced the biggest intervention it's ever made in energy markets. And what they're doing is they're releasing, and when I say they, that's kind of rich countries around the world, they're releasing an unprecedented amount of oil stockpiles. This is basically emergency oil supplies onto the global market to try and deal with what's happening with the oil price. But here's the interesting thing. If you look at the oil price, and this is just looking over the last few days, obviously it went up really sharply, up above $100 a barrel on Monday. Donald Trump came out and said the war is complete, or words to that effect, and then it came down pretty sharply after that. But here's what's striking, OK? So we just had this news of the IEA stock release. Look at what happened to the price afterwards. Basically, it did nothing. OK, and that raises the question, why is that? And part of the answer comes back to the flows of oil around the world and how much we have right now. Now, the big picture here is global crude oil demand is about 100 million barrels of oil a day. And with the Strait of Hormuz being closed, basically 15 million of those barrels have kind of gone. You know, you're not easily able to get hold of them. And so all of this is about trying to fill that gap. And when you look at the Strait of Hormuz, so look at the area here, so that is the area through which shipping's not passing at the moment. Most of the world's oil, or kind of 20% of the world's oil, goes through there. There are pipelines all around the region, raising the question, could you just get it into through those pipelines instead of shipping it out? Well, you can get a certain amount out of this pipeline that goes across Saudi Arabia, the East-West pipeline. There's another pipeline over here that goes kind of from that part of the UAE to that part, to Fujairah. And there is a bit of capacity, so you can get extra 5 million barrels a day out of that one, an extra 0.7 million out of that one. Add that up, OK, and that gap I was talking about earlier, 15 million barrels, you're starting to get towards it. And here's what's kind of striking. You're still 9.25 million barrels short. But if you look at this figure that we just got from the IEA, the really important chart isn't about 400 million barrels, which is the total amount they say they're going to release, but it's just how much they're planning to do each day. And in previous episodes like this, it's been about 2 million barrels a day. This time around, it might well be more. Analysts think potentially, the IEA hasn't confirmed this, but analysts think potentially 4, maybe even 5 million barrels of oil a day. If that's the case, add that to this kind of shortfall, and instead of being kind of 7 million barrels short, we're kind of 5 or so million barrels short. So you see we're starting to get to close that gap. But even so, there is a gap. And that's part of the reason why oil prices are still so high. You have a shortage of oil flowing around the world. And so all around the world, you're starting to see the consequences. In India, in Mangalore, one of the refineries has issued a force majeure note, so basically kind of cancelling contracts. Elsewhere in India, supplies of LPG, so liquefied petroleum gas, they've been rationed. And then also look in places like Thailand, in Vietnam, employees have been urged to work from home. And that's before you count on what's happening closer afield in Europe. We know what's happening to petrol prices in the UK. In Germany, there's been a clampdown on petrol prices. And those kind of measures are expected only to continue as oil prices remain high in the coming days.
Ed there in his spiritual home at a big screen.
Yeah, he loves it. He absolutely loves it. There's been a lot of screen action with those oil prices, I have to say, as well, over the last few weeks. Lots of decisions ahead for UK government, but the US government as well.
Yeah.
Wilf, if you're wondering where he is today, he is out in the States. He's interviewing Scott Bessent, the US Treasury Secretary. So it's going to be fascinating to hear what Scott Bessent tells Wilf about the American strategy going forward with the cost of living crisis.
When my alarm went off at 4 a.m, I definitely was wondering where Wilf was this morning. But there you go. It'd be, yeah, like you say, interesting to hear what he gets out of Scott Bessent, especially as he was quite close friends with Peter Mandelson.
Yeah, I wonder what he's got to say about that as well.
Fascinating stuff. He'll be back next week with more on that. Anyway, stay with us. More on the top stories coming up here on Mornings after the break.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you? People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Good morning. It is 9 o'clock and you're watching Mornings on Sky News. I'm Sophy Ridge.
And I'm Matt Barbet. Good morning.
Iran carries out another wave of attacks targeting fuel as oil rises again above $100 a barrel.
Heavy shelling in Lebanon as Israel batters the capital there, where dozens of displaced families have been sheltering.
An American investigation finds the US was likely responsible for a strike on a primary school that killed at least 165 people, mostly children.
Also this morning, we are diving into the release of the Mandelson Files.
Some of those details about Peter Mandelson's appointment as US ambassador are now public and may throw more pressure onto the Prime Minister. Good morning. Welcome to the programme. Our top story, overnight Iran has launched another wide-scale wave of strikes. There's also been Israeli shelling in Lebanon's capital city, which is full of displaced families trying to shelter.
Yeah, here's what you need to know this morning. In Bahrain, Iran attacked fuel tanks near the international airport there, causing a large fire, as you can see, northeast of the capital, Manama. Bahrain is, of course, home to the US Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters.
2 oil tanks were also attacked in Iraqi waters, killing a crew member. Iraqi officials say they appear to have been targeted by Iranian boats packed with explosives, and perhaps as a consequence, this morning oil prices have again risen above $100 a barrel, despite the largest release of oil reserves by the world's energy watchdog.
In the early hours, at least 8 people were killed, 31 were injured in an Israeli strike in Lebanon. There were no warnings of that attack in central Beirut, where displaced families have been sheltering. The area is not known for having a Hezbollah presence. We're going to go right there now. Cordelia Lynch is in Beirut for us this morning on the ground. Cordy, good to see you. What are you hearing about what happened?
We have had eyewitnesses describe 2 strikes that took place at about 2 o'clock in the morning. We are standing here about 30 metres away from what's known as the Corniche. This is a very popular promenade along the coast here. There are lots of residential buildings, hotels too, and people describe sleeping in tents. They were displaced by this war. They came from Dahieh, from the southern suburbs of Beirut, and from the south of the country too. One man said it was like a zombie apocalypse after this rocket hit. Lots of people wounded. We know at least 8 people have died and 31 have been injured. It is not clear who may or may not have been the target of this strike. We have heard from the IDF, who say that they have been targeting Hezbollah terrorist infrastructure overnight, including buildings connected to Hezbollah. But exactly what was the target of this strike is very unclear, and civilians killed. And we spoke to one man who had wounds from shrapnel that hit him both in the stomach and the leg as well. They describe a terrifying sequence of events, people running for their lives. Some had been gathered together, looking out onto the water, having food together when this first rocket hit. There are 2 cars that we've seen that were damaged as a result of that explosion. But I think what really strikes you being here on the scene is this is the heart of Beirut. It is a popular area. There are a lot of people living nearby. This is not the southern suburbs. It is not known as the centre of Hezbollah in any way, and I think it represents this increasing threat to the people of Lebanon.
Also, Cordelia, the UNICEF this morning has said 1,100 children across the region have been reportedly injured or killed since the wider conflict began, and that does include 4 in Israel, but 91 in Lebanon. And I'd imagine a lot of the civilians you're speaking to there thought they could breathe a bit easier when things paused more recently, but now they've got it back right on their doorsteps.
I think this was a terrifying night for many of the displaced people that were gathered. Lots of families, one man said as many as 200 families who were huddled together trying to get safety because they've been unable to go into any kind of official shelters. They've been forced out of their homes, and they were gathered here by the water trying to get some kind of safety, and then this terrifying moment when these rockets struck. So people do feel exposed and deeply vulnerable. And this, I think, is a very significant moment here in Beirut in this war, in the sense of what this area represents.
Cordelia, you've really, I think, laid out the fear that so many people are feeling in Beirut and across Lebanon as well. Can you just give us a bit of the, I guess, the context Lebanon has been dragged into this conflict that seemed to initially be, the US and Iran. So why has it become involved in this way?
Yeah, we know that there has been a conflict followed by a ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel. Now, when Hezbollah, just a day after the strikes on Iran, decided to fire rockets at Israel, Israel already had a very established plan, and what we've seen them do increasingly since then is hammering the southern suburbs of Beirut and the south. When I was in Israel, people were describing this as a sort of pretext, if you like, for the IDF to move in, to finish the job and to destroy Hezbollah in the way they weren't able to during the 12-day war back in June. And I think what we are seeing is escalating a conflict, the IDF increasing their number of attacks. They insist that they are targeting and destroying the terrorist infrastructure of Hezbollah, but caught in the midst of all of that are hundreds of thousands of displaced people, Sophie.
Cordelia, thank you so much. Stay safe.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump has again been asked about America's war aims. Here's what he said.
The main thing is we have to win this thing, win it quickly, but win it. And there are many people, I'm just watching some of the news, most people say it's already been won. It's just a question of when. When do we stop? We don't want to let it regrow, and ideally would like to see somebody in there that knows what they're doing. In other words, they can build a country.
Let's go straight to Sally Lockwood, shall we, who's in Dubai for us. We've seen an awful lot of activity overnight, haven't we, particularly targeting oil reserves and ships carrying oil.
Yeah, that's right, Sophie. I mean, we have seen that since almost the start of this war, oil infrastructure and shipping targeted routinely, not just here in and around the UAE, but in all the Gulf states. And there's been more of that overnight. Saudi, Qatar, Kuwait, all reporting attacks and interceptions of missiles and drones, as well as Qatar. And here in the UAE, it's been a rather busy night. We had emergency alerts all through the night. I don't think many people got a huge amount of sleep here. And then the news emerged very early, around 7 o'clock this morning, that another vessel had been hit by a projectile, not around the Strait of Hormuz this time, but actually just off the coast of Dubai, south of me here, near Jebel Ali port. A vessel was hit by a projectile. It caught on fire. The crew are all safe. This is happening routinely every day at the moment. Iran attacking commercial shipping because, of course, they've effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz, that strategic choke point for so much of the world's energy, which is causing so much disruption and economic pain. But on top of that, we've also seen Dubai International Airport routinely targeted. And once again overnight, there was a strike, a drone strike, very close to the airport area in an area known as Dubai Creek Harbour. There was a hotel apartment block that was hit there. It was evacuated. Everyone is safe. But these are the routine attacks that we're seeing here every day at the moment. And in the latest development, in the last 24 hours, Iran has said it's also going to target banks and financial institutions that have American and Israeli interests. And this morning, in the last 90 minutes or so, I've heard from two sources in and around the financial district here in Dubai, known as DIFC, of a reported drone strike there. We're still awaiting official confirmation of that. But yesterday, when that news emerged that Iran was going to start targeting these financial institutions, it resulted in a number of banks and offices and buildings emptying and having this evacuation order in place, telling staff to go home, to go to the nearest safe place away from the office. And many are now looking at evacuating the country. I've been having conversations in recent days with a number of people who work for global companies here, that they are being advised by their companies to evacuate. All staff are being offered flights out, alternative accommodation elsewhere, along with their family members. And the Australian government has also updated its advice to citizens in the Middle East, saying we're concerned that this regional conflict is likely to continue and could escalate. If you wish to leave the Middle East, do not wait until it is too late. And that is the advice that I'm hearing is being given to so many people who work here for these financial institutions. So what we're seeing unfold here in the UAE, which is the hardest hit country in these attacks by Iran, more missiles and drones have been fired into UAE airspace than any other country in this war. And perhaps that's because Dubai especially has built its reputation over the last few decades as an economic powerhouse, as a city that projects confidence, stability, prosperity, and by attacking not just shipping and the busiest airport hub in the world, Dubai, but also now its financial centre, it's looking to ensure that this conflict is felt well beyond the Middle East.
Sally, thank you very much. We've been talking so much about the impact on oil and energy prices, but I just want to bring you the pictures of this Thai vessel that was struck by Iran, because this, I think, just really brings it home about what we're talking about in the Strait of Hormuz. So this is a Thai-flagged vessel. It was 11 nautical miles north of Oman, and it was hit by Iran. They've actually claimed, responsibility as well for it, and the fire then broke out on board. 23 crew members had to be rescued from that ship.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's long been said, certainly from the US, their concerns were around Iran's nuclear capability. But the real ace card in Iran's hand is the Strait of Hormuz, because they have long known that they can hold the world to ransom effectively by strangling that supply of oil and liquefied natural gas. And that is what pictures like that kind of prove that point, don't they?
Yeah, it's almost like a kind of hybrid warfare. When we're talking about, the means of war changing, whether it is, hacking or disinformation, and economic warfare as well, which Iran has used to such kind of devastating effect.
Now, look, we've also learned more about one of the most devastating military mistakes of the war so far, that strike on a school in Iran, which killed at least 165 people, the vast majority of them children. Well,
an American investigation has found the United States was, in their words, likely responsible. US correspondent David Blevins has the details.
This is an ongoing investigation, so these are preliminary findings, but they are damning, that it is likely the United States fired the missile that hit the school. The word likely doing some heavy lifting there, given the mounting evidence. That the missile did not veer off course, as some have suggested, but the school was mistaken for a military target. And while the Defence Intelligence Agency here in the United States made the decision, Israel was involved in the process of selecting targets. That's all very difficult for President Trump. His press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, says he hasn't seen the report, but will accept the outcome of the investigation. He has been out and about in Ohio and Kentucky, trying to reassure people that he's addressing the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz and that oil prices will be falling again soon. Why? Well, it's midterm election year, and he was the president who won back the White House on a pledge not to engage in another foreign war, but to address the cost of living right here at home.
David Blevins there. Well, the other major story, domestic story this morning, dominating all the front pages, is the release of what's been known as the Mandelson Files.
Yeah, and domestic story still very much influenced by America, of course. The first release of these documents, though, about the appointment of Peter Mandelson as US ambassador, will make pretty uncomfortable reading for the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. I'm not sure it tells us any surprises, no smoking gun, but the insight is fascinating, not least what Jonathan Powell, very senior national security advisor, was saying at the time.
Yeah, so Jonathan Powell obviously knew Blair from Blair, but also Mandelson from way back, and he raised red flags about the appointment. And also, I guess it just lays out very, very clearly in black and white in the vetting document that Keir Starmer was aware at the time of the appointment that Peter Mandelson had this ongoing relationship with someone who was, convicted of a child sex offence. Earlier, we heard from the Paymaster General and Cabinet Office Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds, who insisted the Prime Minister has taken responsibility despite ignoring some of those warning signs. I think that there is a point there that I really need to come back on, because it does feel to me like you're almost trying to say that we didn't do anything wrong here, because you're saying the Prime Minister was lied to, that he was misled. It was all Peter Mandelson's fault. The Prime Minister had a document that said he continued a relationship with a convicted paedophile, right? That is there in the document. He was advised by his national security advisor, Jonathan Powell, by the top civil servants at the Foreign Office, and he didn't listen to them. So you have got to take some responsibility here. Will you admit that the Prime Minister did something wrong?
The Prime Minister has taken responsibility for this. The Prime Minister has accepted that he made a mistake in appointing Lord Mandelson. Most importantly, the Prime Minister has apologised about this decision to Jeffrey Epstein's victims, who have to be re-traumatised and go through the memory of their terrible experiences every time we have a public debate around this. So the Prime Minister has taken responsibility. There's no doubt about that. And that is also one of the reasons why we are now looking...
What exactly has he apologised for? What has he taken responsibility for?
He has apologised for believing what was said to him by Peter.
That's what the government was saying to Sophie this morning. Our political correspondent Alex Rogers is here with us now. Look, as I said to Sophie there, none of this is massively revelatory, but it does, as Beth Rigby was telling us earlier on, mean that fuse continues to burn for the Prime Minister and his future.
Yeah, what Beth was saying, there was no smoking gun, and I think she's right there. I think what's been so striking is just how plainly and simply the case was made to the Prime Minister that appointing Peter Mandelson as US Ambassador would be risky. I think that's what's been damaging, is that all this information was laid out to him. I think that the new thing we did learn was Jonathan Powell's concern, saying that you know it was what was it that he said? He said it was
weird timing.
Yes, that was it. Yeah,
weirdly rushed.
Weirdly rushed. Sorry, yeah, weirdly rushed and unusual. And so there are questions now around why Keir Starmer didn't listen to such a prominent advisor who, as you say, goes back to the Blair years.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also, you know, sources telling the Times newspaper and others that actually he was even stronger in private, saying, like, you know, this guy's been sacked twice before. Like, there are risks involved. Alex, so where are we? So we've got some of the files. What should we be expecting in the coming weeks and months?
Yes, I think the files that we've got aren't even potentially the most damaging. We're still expecting more files in the next weeks, which could involve like WhatsApps and emails surrounding his time actually as ambassador. That could be even more incriminating. So the saga just continues to drag on, and every time we think Keir Starmer thinks he's maybe turned the focus onto, you know, the war, how he's handling that, it always comes back, and that's the danger with this, is the drip of documents just continues to bring back those questions around his judgment.
The danger for Labour, as well as, of course, the Tories trying to capitalise on it. Here's what Kemi Badenoch says.
This is yet another indictment of Keir Starmer's judgment. He wants to make this all about Peter Mandelson asking for money. The fact is, he wouldn't have been paying out that severance package if he hadn't appointed him in the first place. And the vetting that we have now seen, the documents that we have now seen, have shown that the Prime Minister should never have made this decision. He has not been honest with the country. He's not been honest with Parliament about what he knew. Now he's complaining about the severance package, but the fact is he's the one who signed it off in the first place.
Alex, thank you very much indeed. As Alex was saying, not the latest, I'm sure, the last thing we'll hear from the Mandelson Files. Now, we talked a lot about student loans on this programme, and in particular concerns the system is unfair because of the high interest that so many graduates are having to pay.
Yeah, Parliament is launching a new inquiry to explore just how fair, or perhaps unfair, the student loans system currently is.
And I think we can hear now from our political correspondent, Lucy McDade, who had a challenge of explaining the issue in just 60 seconds. Good luck to her. Let's see how she got on.
In it, where we are with student loans. So start the clock. Firstly, we're talking about people who went to uni between 2012 and 2023. When they start earning above a certain salary, they pay 9% back every month, plus interest at the retail price index rate of inflation, plus up to 3%. This has made it impossible for many to reduce their debt, even when repaying it. Rachel Reeves has said she'll increase the repayment threshold. Good news. But then freeze it for 3 years, and that's the bad news. Even the Tory leader, whose party introduced the system, is now putting pressure on the government to do something about it. Labour MPs too have come out, and they've said it's all a scam. Now, given events in the Middle East, worries about energy prices, everything else, like the NHS, Labour wants to spend money on, the Chancellor is downplaying ideas any changes will come soon. But a group of influential MPs have said they're going to investigate student finance and whether or not grads are being taken for a ride.
She did it.
She
60
did.
seconds.
She said that.
Stop that going.
Yeah, she really got it all in there. So many themes come out of this situation. Well, this scandal, actually, a lot of people would call it. For me, I mean, universities themselves are struggling to get enough students and to get the revenue up. Well, if you believe in growing the economy, then you're going to need well-trained people to feed into that economy. I appreciate not all of those go to university as well. But the thing that sticks out when you hear someone like Lucy explain it to me is, why were the loans inflation plus interest? They tried to just make money off students, or were they providing them with a service to be able to get the degree that they've worked so hard to get? The fact that it's inflation plus 3% potentially seems the bit that's unfair.
The other thing as well, because we have spoken to quite a lot of students on this programme, and actually, to be fair to our own team as well, lots of them are, you know, paying extortionate amount of interest on their own student loans at the minute, the mornings team. The thing that often comes up is that they feel that they weren't explained to as well. They went to school and, you know, the advisors were all like, oh, God, yeah, just get it. It's nothing. It's the best loan you'll ever get in your life. And then you look at the terms and you're like, hang on a minute, I've been paying off hundreds of pounds every month and I owe more now than I did when I left university.
If you're a student doctor, obviously the course is much longer, the borrowing can be much higher. And then a lot of them are arguing that when they get to the end of that training, they qualify as a doctor, they can't then get a job either. And I mean, I know that's another argument and something that the BMA has been arguing about as well. But the fact that you can have all this debt and then not actually necessarily have a better outcome as a result is what really sticks in people's throats.
Yeah, but Parliament now looking at it, it does feel to me like they are going to move it in some way on this, the government, because it feels like the groundswell of opinion is really starting to become louder and louder.
Let's have more now on the Mandelson Files. We'll be joined by the Conservative Deputy Chairman in a moment, Matt Vickers.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Big Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to. Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Ridge and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started. Welcome back. We can talk now to the Conservatives. I'm joined by the party's Deputy Chairman, Matt Vickers. Good to have you on the programme today. Peter Mandelson Files, the first tranche released. What are your sort of main takeaways?
I think, it is a complete and utter failure of judgment on the part of the Prime Minister. Remember, when this thing broke, he told us that if he knew then what he knew now, he wouldn't have made that appointment. Anybody reading those files knows he knew more than enough not to make this appointment. His own National Security Advisor warning him about it. He knew that the man who he chose to appoint to this country's most prestigious diplomatic position had links to the worst, most evil paedophile ever to walk the earth. It's unacceptable. It's completely wrong. The Prime Minister got this completely and utterly wrong.
So are you calling on him to resign?
I think he definitely should go, if not for all the other things that he's inflicting upon this country.
You don't have to list everything that you've...
This government is riddled with scandal. We heard about the Homeless Minister had to go because she was making her tenants homeless. We heard about the Anti-Corruption Minister who had to go because she was tied up in a corruption scandal. We heard about the... former Deputy Prime Minister who didn't pay her bills. It's a disaster, this government. That's before we talk about the economic harm they're inflicting on the people of this country, before we talk about all those people being put out of work and all the other terrible things that this government's doing.
You've had your moment to kind of talk about all the terrible things that you believe the government is doing. I'm keen now to talk to you about Iran, right? Do you support the US-Israel action in Iran?
Yes, we stand shoulder to shoulder with them. We do not believe that Iran should be able to get hold of any nuclear weapons. This is a regime that is funding terrorism, even on our own soil. This is a regime that has butchered tens of thousands of its own people who are standing up for their own freedoms. And this is a regime that threatens to get hold of nuclear weapons and do untold damage to us and others.
I don't think many people would shed a tear for the Ayatollah, right? And the brutality of the regime butchering their own people is clear to see as well. But you say that you stand shoulder to shoulder with the US in a war that has led to the installation of a new supreme leader who feels like the old supreme leader on steroids, that has led to atrocities like the bombing of a school where over 100 children were killed. Is that a war that you really want to stand shoulder to shoulder in?
You cannot allow those people... You saw what they did to their own people. You cannot allow that regime to get hold of nuclear weapons. Iran cannot be allowed to get hold of nuclear weapons, and we need to do whatever is required to prevent that.
Do you really believe this is about nuclear weapons? Because at the beginning we were told it was about regime change. I'm really confused. But this is kind of my point, because it is very, very unclear to me what the US's objectives are.
There is a real and active threat of them getting hold of nuclear weapons. We need to do everything required with our allies to prevent that happening. We've seen what they'll do to their own people. Therefore, you can make good assumptions about what they will do to the rest of the world if they were allowed to get hold of those nuclear weapons. It's in our national interest to ensure they don't get hold of them.
It may be not be in our economic interests. You can see the spiralling cost of oil again today, over $100 a barrel. Is it what the people of Britain want?
Imagine if this government didn't make the decision to stop us drilling in the North Sea, to get our own oil and gas. It's undermined our energy security. It's driven up prices. It's cost a lot. It's cost hundreds of thousands of people potentially their jobs, particularly in my part of the world. People are losing jobs because of that decision. And what's it doing for the environment? It's not improving the environment. In fact, it's increasing emissions importing this stuff. Buying it in from abroad is not helping in any which way. The Labour Party has signed up to Dale Vance and Just Stop Oil's agenda. It's ridiculous.
Even if we did what you wanted and got all this oil from the North Sea, we would still be buying, energy from the international market. And you can see what has happened to the international market. It's not just us. It's
we're
everywhere.
More reliant on it. We're more reliant on it as a result of those decisions. But it gets worse.
But my point is that this is a war that is threatening to push up the cost of living for Brits. That is correct, right?
It's a war that could push up the cost of living, but actually what the government's done on this front by making those decisions about not drilling the North Sea. But moreover, we're still waiting to find out what's happening with fuel duty. For the last 15 years, fuel duty has been frozen.
They've said that they've frozen it, haven't they?
No, they've said it's going up in September. There is a commitment there from the government that they're going to allow it to go up in September.
They've cancelled the...
She's been in there, she's been questioned on this. She will not...
They've cancelled the,
in September, fuel duty is going up.
And they said that it's under review.
6 months? No, they've said in September it is going up. She will not commit to a freeze. The last government froze it for 15 years. Despite the world economic crash, despite the pandemic and all the cost pressures of that, this government, they've been taxing anything that moves, and now they're going to hit fuel that will cost families across the country, cost rural communities and cost businesses that are now going to the wall at the fastest rate since the world economic crash.
Matt Vickers, thank you very much indeed. Good to have you on the programme today. Matt Vickers there speaking to us. We're going to be talking to Baroness Helena Kennedy about the latest fallout from the Mandelson Files, continuing our coverage of that next.
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere.
The day those present would never forget.
First question, Sky News.
Do you hate the thought of losing to him?
I hate the thought of losing to anyone.
Historic day here today.
They are pushing forward.
They dashed to the water.
Wait, what country are you from?
From the UK.
Why don't you go back to your country?
Huge questions to be grappled with.
That is totally unprecedented.
Been quite some day.
Let me start with breaking news.
Right, let's continue our coverage, shall we, for the release of some of the Mandelson Files.
Yeah, and the reaction to it. We're joined now by Baroness Helena Kennedy. Files lead to more files, lead to more files being released, and we haven't got to the end of any of them so far. But what do you make of this latest lot? Does it shed more light on what happened for you?
Well, it actually doesn't, because it's what I suspected was the case, which was that the Prime Minister, I could tell by the language that Keir Starmer originally used, where he said, my team were lied to, my team were lied to, my team were lied. And the fact that he used the term my team said that he himself had never, ever sat down with Peter Mandelson and had a conversation with him.
Yeah.
And I think his lawyer's instinct at that stage might have led him in a different direction. Whereas what we know is that he really had left it to his close advisors, Morgan McSweeney and the other guy, who was his comms person. He'd left it to them to do the sort of, if you like, the other bit of vetting. And I think that I think that's where this has fallen down, because I do think it matters. If you're going to make an appointment like that, you have to sit in the room with the person.
Yeah.
And I just feel in my bones that a good lawyer like Keir Starmer would have got a sense that Peter is a bit of a chancer.
Yeah, but and you're qualified to say what a good lawyer is because you're a human rights lawyer yourself, and Keir Starmer started.
Well, Keir was in my chambers. I knew
yeah.
him as a young man.
So, is he just not inquisitive enough?
Well, no, listen, when you're in that role, and look, I've been now certainly in the House of Lords for, over 25 years. Being in government is a much harder thing than most of us know. And I've never been that close up to it. But I do know that there's 100 things to do before breakfast. Your day and your diary is absolutely packed to the hilt. You have to have very good people around you. And I think that we've seen Keir Starmer performing very well on the international stage because he's had very good people dealing with him on the international stage and on international affairs and briefing him properly and so on. Domestically, that's not been true. And I do think that the people who were there, the Morgan McSweeney, who I can't remember the name of the guy who's gone up, who was put into the House of Lords but has never been seen, Matthew Doyle. I mean, these were people whom he was having to rely upon. And somehow, I mean, you have to have the best of people in there, and I don't think he did.
It feels, I guess, slightly convenient. It wasn't Keir Starmer's fault, it was his advisor's fault. It wasn't our fault when Peter Mandelson lied to us. Like, doesn't the Prime Minister need to take more responsibility? Because what we did see yesterday was it was laid out there, right? He was warned.
Yes, but Sophie, I do think he was taking the rap for those people. He had never, at no point has Keir Starmer turned around and said Morgan McSweeney was the person who wanted Mandelson in there. He was
the Prime Minister. Yes. It's his US ambassador. It's not just like, kind of a small job.
I agree with you, and that's what I'm saying, is that I think that you should have been in the room, but it was quite obvious what he was saying, that my team saw him, they had answers from him, he lied and lied and lied and lied. And I'm sure that they made an assessment. But there were people batting for this job to go to Peter Mandelson. And the reason they were was because they were his friends. They were people who'd worked for him, who'd been trained by him. They were his products. And so that's the thing here. Was the Prime Minister aware of the extent to which they were the products of Peter Mandelson? And so I just think that you can't, as Prime Minister, be doing every single one of those things. Yeah. But you have to choose the ones where you do have to have your finger on it. And I think that this one really has serious consequences. Now, I think...
Hang on a second, but you're absolutely right. They can't overlook everything. Like any CEO of a business, they have to have their trusted advisors and they have the board in place and everything else. But the name Peter Mandelson has to be a, blaring alarm going, hang on. We know this guy's got previous. We know now that Jonathan Powell's saying, look, I worked with him, maybe even liked him, but this guy's been sacked and will probably be sacked again. Come on, he can't say, I had to rely on the team for this
Jonathan
one.
Powell's thing was that he thought it was weirdly fast, the way in which the decision was made. And
he also said there was a risk of reputational damage as well.
And the Foreign Office felt that there was the reputational risk. But let me tell you, the previous Prime Ministers, Tony Blair, held in great esteem by so many people in the Labour.
Don't make a right,
no, they don't make a right. But other Prime Ministers made those mistakes too. And other Prime Ministers in other political parties have made those kind of mistakes too.
There's just one other question I wanted to squeeze in your kind of expertise. It's on Iran, if you don't mind me asking as well, because we've seen, you know, the US take responsibility, kind of, for the strike on a school. Is that a war crime?
Oh, it's a war crime, absolutely. I mean, I personally am of the view that this was not a lawful war from the very outset, because when you're talking about we had to do this preemptively, the threat to you has to be imminent, and I don't think there was any evidence of there being a really imminent threat from Iran at that moment. And I have no time for Iran, let me tell you, because I've done so much work on human rights abuses in Iran, and so, you know, I would be personally thrilled to see regime change. But you can't go down that road. I believe that, you know, if you want to have, you know, peace and justice in the world, then you have to conform to law. And I'm afraid that we've been seeing it torn up in recent years by different states. And I think that we should be looking to our laurels on that. There's going to be lessons from this, because the consequences of war, you can never control the outcome. And look at what's happening economically now.
It's very powerful words. Thank you very much indeed. Baroness Helena Kennedy then.
Well, we are going to focus, as Baroness Helena Kennedy said there, on the economy, and oil prices briefly nudged once more above $100 a barrel again this morning.
Well, Iran is warning it could rise to as much as $200 a barrel. Is that realistic? We'll try and find out. Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, is here. Just how seriously do we need to take the price of oil?
Well, let me give you kind of a quote from the International Energy Agency. They are basically one of the most authoritative sources on what's going on in the oil market, and they've literally just released their latest kind of state of play of the oil market. They say the war in the Middle East is creating the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market.
Wow.
So we've never seen anything like this, not in the 1970s, not in the 80s, all those oil price shocks. According to the people who have been watching this is an organisation which was set up to deal with oil price shocks like this. We've never seen anything like this. And it's worth saying they did release, just yesterday we had this big story, they released an unprecedented amount of emergency oil supplies out there onto the global market, 400 million barrels of oil. The oil price has gone up since then.
Yeah.
It hasn't gone down. And the market is not behaving in a way that is, I mean, it is deeply worrying, obviously, if you're, for all of us, you know, consumers out there, and you see it on petrol prices. You already see it when you go to your local petrol station. And that's before we get to gas prices. I think the big question now, I mean, you know, the thing we've been saying throughout, and it's, you know, there's nothing very clever about it, but it is incredibly true, is the longer this goes on for, the greater the disruption, because the longer oil prices are high for, that just feeds into the rest of the economy, and the same for gas prices. But I think the deeper issue is everyone knows that Donald Trump doesn't want to have high, you know, gas prices, as they call them in the US. He's facing the midterms later on this year, or at least his party is. I think there's this assumption that he can kind of make them go down just by willing it to be so. And the interesting thing is, last week he stepped up in the stage in Florida and said, this is complete, or like words to that effect. And then oil prices did go down a bit, but they've kind of gone up since then. I think that's the question. There you can see that's the oil price just in the last kind of 7 days or so. And you can see how it kind of went up. There was a bit of a roller coaster. It went up very sharply at the start of this week, and then that's it coming down, down the mountain.
Yes.
After Donald Trump said those words, but now it's climbing up again. And the issue is that you're seeing attacks on tankers and container ships, actually, within the kind of Persian Gulf. And no one knows how easily you can put this back in the box, even if Donald Trump wants it to be that way.
The knock-on effects are so many and so, in some ways, terrifying. I mean, look, China was getting a lot of oil from the Gulf. Instead, they're going to then bid on the global markets to get it. The same with liquefied natural gas. You're seeing, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, but ships turning around and going somewhere else because they're going to pay more money for it. And so looking at how most people are going to be heating their homes in the UK later in the year, what is the most likely scenario? Well,
I mean, the one kind of piece of reassurance is the gas price has gone up a lot, but it's not as high as it was back in 2022. So we are not in that territory.
There's more resilience in the network?
Well, perhaps, and I think that the price has been building up at that point. To some extent, there's a little bit more resilience. People have been working on trying to find new sources of oil and gas for you know, in the intervening period. But you can't just switch this stuff off and on very easily. But as you say, yeah, we saw, you know, for instance, there was a liquefied natural gas tanker, Africa. We in the UK are reliant on liquefied natural gas to provide some of our supply, not all of it, but some of it. And it was literally heading to Spain, and then it suddenly turns around and goes to Asia. And what that's a reflection of is the fact that gas prices, it's kind of a global market, at least for that kind of stuff, have gone up, and everyone is responding to that. And around the world, the issue with an energy price shock, as you know, Matt, as you know, Sophie, we have all experienced this. Everyone has experienced this in the last few years. Is it trickles into everything. So it trickles into things like your fuel prices. It trickles into plane prices. So Cathay Pacific have just announced a big increase in their fuel surcharges, and we're going to see it. Unfortunately, you're likely to see that when you're booking your holidays.
Food inflation as well.
And food, and then there's this longer tail thing of things like food inflation, because what are most foods made with? They're made with fertiliser, or at least the stuff that's grown. Or and what's most fertiliser made of? It's made of gas. It comes from gas. Unfortunately, these are now kind of semi-familiar lessons for us in Europe because we've experienced them kind of intimately. One hopes, as I say, that you can put this back in the box. But I think there's a geopolitical question as to whether you can actually kind of pacify the different nations in the Gulf. And then there's going to be an economic question as to whether this just causes long-term, slightly higher, or indeed much higher oil and gas prices than before. And no one really knows the answer to these questions, which is what's unnerving.
Yeah, unnerving is a word. I feel more unnerved after talking to you.
It's maybe not as bad in 2022 at the moment, and hopefully we've learned some lessons from them.
Yeah. We like you very much, but when we see you, we know it's
really sorry.
Bad news, unfortunately. Good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Now, time for a quick look at the weather.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
The next few days are bringing strong winds, showers and longer spells of rain, and it's turning colder into the bargain too. There will be a fairly mild, windy morning ahead with locally severe gales over northern and western coasts and hills. Central and southwestern Britain, Ireland and the south of Northern Ireland will see prolonged rain taking over, while the northwest will see early rain clear into sunny spells and blustery showers. They will be heavy at times and wintry on the hills. Looking at central and southeastern England, meanwhile, it's going to be mainly dry, if increasingly cloudy and a bit cooler.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Coming up, we're going to be talking about student loans. Is the interest that graduates are paying back on their student loans deeply unfair? We'll be talking to one of the members of the Parliamentary Committee looking into this.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders.
It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbors, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days, as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical.
Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history.
The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbors that harbor decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day.
Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate.
It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage.
Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching tonight on The Wrap. We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why. He did know what he was doing. Both agree on that, can we?
No.
No. You can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable? What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree.
And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Now, this has been a deeply personal and costly issue for many people watching. Student loans.
But there may be a bit of good news coming your way. We need some good news at the minute, frankly, because Parliament's launching an inquiry into whether the repayment system is unfair.
We're joined now by a member of that Treasury Committee and Labour MP, Yuan Yang. Good morning to you. Look, as we said there at the start, Yuan, a lot of people are looking at this thinking, I can't carry on paying this much longer. I can't wait for the thing to just be cancelled sometime in my 60s. Do you think there is change afoot?
So the reason that we're setting about this inquiry is because of that huge swell of opinion and discontent that we've been hearing as constituency MPs from recent graduates and their family. My constituencies in Reading, I would represent the area around the University of Reading, and I know that so many of those graduates will also have quite strong opinions about the fairness and the terms that they're facing. So at the heart of our inquiry that the Treasury Committee is launching today is the question, is it fair right now?
Do we need to look as well at particular courses and the value for money or not that they may be presenting to students? Because I guess, if you're paying this amount of money for a student loan and you're on a degree at an institution that has historically a very poor return on your money, is that something we need to be a bit more open about?
So I think in order for applicants to university to make an informed decision about value for money on their courses, they need to have a clear and transparent idea of what they'll be repaying. And one of the questions we're putting to young graduates, and anyone over the age of 16 is very much welcome to get involved and submit evidence to us in this inquiry. One of the questions we're putting out there is, well, is there enough information when you go into the student loan package in the first place and you take on what can be quite an onerous and for some people a lifelong contract? Is there enough information for you to make an informed decision?
You don't need to be a graduate to know that there are two sides to every equation. And the other side of this equation is the universities themselves, many of whom are strapped for cash. Look, they're looking at value for money of their courses, and a lot of them are just getting rid of the courses because they can't necessarily, I hate to say this term, sell them to people. They're also not expecting to get the number of foreign students coming in because of, the ongoing discussion around immigration. What needs to be done for the universities themselves? Because, of course, they are vitally important for providing educated people who are going to help grow our economy.
So yes, you're right in that the question of university funding either can be through student loans or through general taxation and through government funding. So one of the questions we're looking at in this inquiry is, do we have the balance right? But we're not looking at the overall amount of funding going to universities. That is, of course, a really big issue. As a university MP, I do see that, but that is not a question within the scope of our inquiry.
But let me just pick up back on that. It was the new Labour government that wanted, under Tony Blair, 50% of school leavers to go to universities. They encourage, effectively, universities and some polytechnics to become more like businesses and then investing when borrowing was cheap to build their spaces. And now a lot of them left with a huge deficit. That is another part of this scandal.
So I was one of those students who grew up under New Labour and went to university in 2008, in fact, study economics. And what got me really politically motivated and interested in what was going on around me was the tripling of student fees in 2010 when the coalition government came in. So at the heart, I think, of a lot of the discontent we're seeing from students and graduates today are the so-called Plan 2 students who went to university in that 2012 to 2022 period. Now they're facing a much higher level of debt, much more onerous repayment terms, and they've also faced historically much higher interest rates than other plans of students, such as my cohort and the cohort that came after them. So one of the questions we're putting out there is, the government and previous Conservative governments have sliced up these different cohorts of students so that each has actually got quite different repayment terms. Is that fair?
We're going to have to jump in because we are in danger of crashing off air, but this is such an important subject and I'm sure we'll be talking to you an awful lot more about it as you get more evidence in. Thanks for being on the programme.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on the programme as well.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Just think about so many of these things relate to the money in our pockets, whether, you've got kids who are going to university and we want to help them out or they want to fund it themselves, the price of fuel, terrifying portent of what may be to come from aid, thinking about how people are thinking about the money in their pockets, and that's the big concern right now.
It really is, and it's a stressful time for lots of us. Thank you so much for joining us mornings. Wolf will be back, of course, with his interview with Scott Besson. That'll be from later on today. But it's been great having you on the programme. Thanks.
You've been very kind.
Thanks for coming in, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
Lots more coming up in just a few moments' time on Sky News.